The
I
hardest
always
part
love
about
coming here.
staring at the
The
forged
architecture is
withdrawal
just
slip
so
wasn't
beautiful,
the missing
and it's always such a bright
$85,000.
and sunny day to
It
enjoy
was the
it.
blue ink. The swooping curves and sharp lines of my name looked pristine. My mother, Susan, always prided herself on her flawless calligraphy. Growing up, she insisted on filling out every tax return and medical form, treating penmanship like a moral virtue. I never realized that innocent habit was a loaded weapon. Sitting in that sterile downtown bank branch, the truth clicked into place. She had not just stolen my life savings. She had sat at her kitchen table and practiced my handwriting to execute the theft. Before I tell you how I dismantled her perfect illusion, tell me, how old are you right now, and what would you do if your own mother robbed you? Drop your age in the comments, and welcome to Intimately Told Stories. My name is Kristen Lee. I am 32 years old, and for the last 6 years my life revolved around the relentless rhythm of Florida tourism. As an event director for a luxury hospitality group in Tampa, my seasons were measured in chaotic corporate retreats and demanding bridal parties. I traded holidays and weekends for double shifts, surviving on stale banquet coffee and sheer willpower. I squirreled away every spare dollar because I had a goal: a beachfront condo, a quiet sanctuary away from the transient crowds and away from my family. The money sat in a legacy high-yield savings account my parents opened when I was 17. The interest rate was a relic of a bygone financial era, too lucrative to abandon. 3 years ago, I brought up removing my parents from the account. Susan shut it down with a masterclass in manipulation. She painted vivid scenarios of me ending up in a coma after a car wreck on Interstate 4, asking how they would pay my medical bills if they lacked access to my funds. I chose peace over protocol. I believed her concern was real. Yesterday afternoon, the payoff for those years of aching feet and forced smiles finally arrived. My realtor called, her voice bright and rushing through the speaker. The seller accepted my offer. I had 24 hours to wire the earnest money. I sat on my cramped apartment sofa, pulled up my banking app, and tapped the screen to route the transfer. The loading icon spun for 2 seconds. Then, the available balance appeared: $412. My chest tightened so fast I forgot how to breathe. I refreshed the application again, tapping the screen until my fingertip ached. The number remained fixed. A single transaction had drained the ledger 3 days prior. I drove to the bank in a haze, gripping the steering wheel so hard my hands went numb. Now the branch manager clears his throat, breaking the silence in his windowless office. The room smells like cheap printer ink and ozone from the copy machine. He avoids my gaze, staring instead at his keyboard as he slides the manual authorization form across the desk. The funds were routed to a joint external account, he murmurs, his voice cautious, held by Michael and Tyler Lee, my father and my older brother. Tyler, the son who coasted through life on endless bailouts and unpaid loans. I traced the edge of the forged document with my index finger. The cold air conditioning bit through my thin linen blazer, but my skin burned. A lifetime of labor, every skipped vacation, every hour dealing with entitled guests, erased by a single stroke of a pen. I stared at my own stolen signature. I was looking at financial ruin orchestrated not by a faceless scammer, but by the people who called me family. The drive from the downtown bank branch to my parents' subdivision in Brandon felt like a fever dream, navigating through a blurry haze of highway traffic. The midday Florida sun beat down through the windshield, turning the interior of my sedan into a sweltering furnace. I gripped the steering wheel so tight the leather groaned under my palms, my knuckles stark white against the charcoal gray trim. My mind raced, desperate to construct a logical, innocent scenario. A banking error, a temporary hold. Maybe Tyler had suffered a catastrophic medical emergency and they meant to ask my permission first, but panicked in the chaos of a hospital waiting room. I built a flimsy mental raft of excuses because the alternative was a reality my brain refused to process. The subdivision was a sprawling maze of identical manicured lawns, pristine sidewalks, and uniform terracotta roofs. Their house sat at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, projecting an image of flawless upper-middle-class tranquility. I slammed my car door, ignoring the blistering heat radiating off the dark asphalt, and marched up the stamped concrete driveway. I did not bother knocking. I shoved the heavy oak front door open, and a blast of frigid central air conditioning hit my sweat-dampened skin. The house smelled of lemon polish and vanilla candles, exactly as it had for 2 decades. I expected chaos. I expected my mother pacing the hardwood floors, phone in hand, trying to reverse a terrible mistake. Instead, I found a domestic scene so undisturbed it made my stomach pitch sideways. Susan stood at the marble kitchen island, her blonde hair perfectly sprayed into place, calmly slicing a lemon with a ceramic knife. The sharp clink of ice cubes echoed against crystal glasses. In the adjoining living room, my father, Robert, lounged deep in his leather recliner. The soft blue glow of his tablet illuminated his chin as he casually scrolled through the afternoon news. "Mom." I choked out the words, scraping against my dry throat. "The bank account. The $85,000. It is gone." Susan did not drop the knife. She did not gasp or feign ignorance. She placed the lemon wedge on the rim of a tall glass, poured amber liquid from a frosted pitcher, and turned to face me. Her expression was pleasant, wearing the exact polite mask she utilized for neighborhood association meetings. "Kristen, honey, keep your voice down," she murmured, wiping her hands on a linen towel. "We needed to move some funds around. Tyler and Ashley hit a snag with the new house." The sheer casualness of her tone paralyzed me. I stared at the iced tea in her hand, watching a bead of condensation drip down the side of the glass. "You forged my signature. You cleared out my entire savings account." Susan sighed, a sharp intake of breath that signaled her patience was fraying. "Nobody forged anything. I am on that legacy account. I have always been on that account. Families share resources when times get tough, Kristen." Tyler discovered some unexpected structural emergencies at the Orlando property. "You know it is an older build." I knew the property well. Tyler and his wife had purchased a sprawling fixer-upper 3 weeks ago. A reckless decision they made without saving a dime for a down payment, relying instead on Robert to co-sign the mortgage. Tyler had coasted through his 20s and early 30s, bouncing from failed startup ideas to entry-level jobs he inevitably quit because his bosses were supposedly unfair. While I worked back-to-back weekend wedding events, hauling heavy floral arrangements until my shoulders bruised, Tyler spent his afternoons playing golf on my father's country club guest pass. "Structural emergencies," I repeated, my voice shaking with a potent mix of adrenaline and despair. "I am closing on my condo tomorrow. I have 24 hours to wire the earnest money. You knew this. You knew exactly what that money was for." From the living room, Robert finally spoke. He did not look up from his screen. His index finger lazily swiped down to read the next paragraph of his article. "A single woman does not need a luxury property on the beach, Kristen. It is an extravagant purchase." I whipped my head toward him, my pulse pounding in my ears. "It is my money. I earned every single penny of it working double shifts." "And we put a roof over your head for 18 years," Robert countered, his tone flat and utterly bored. "Your brother has a toddler, a growing family. They need a safe foundation, not a crumbling foundation. You are young. You have a good job. You can rebuild your savings. Tyler's situation is an emergency." The chilling logic settled over the room like a suffocating blanket. In their eyes, my 6 years of grueling labor, the weekends I sacrificed, the holidays I spent serving wealthy tourists instead of resting, none of it belonged to me. I was simply a financial reservoir for the golden child. My success was only valuable as a safety net for Tyler's endless failures. The condo I wanted to buy represented genuine independence and a quiet sanctuary earned through sheer grit. To them, my independence was a frivolous luxury.
I want it back,
I stated. My tone dropped the frantic, breathless edge and hardened into something cold and sharp. I am calling the bank, and I am telling them that transaction was unauthorized. I want the money wired back into my account by 5 o'clock today. Susan's pleasant facade vanished in an instant. Her blue eyes narrowed, the corners of her mouth pulling down into a tight, hard line. She set the iced tea on the granite counter with a sharp clack. "You will do no such thing," she snapped. Her voice dripped with sudden venom. "How can you be so incredibly selfish? Your niece is sleeping in a house with bad plumbing and rotting wood in the walls, and you are throwing a tantrum over a vanity purchase. You should be ashamed of yourself." Selfish. The word tasted like ash in my mouth. "You stole from me. You committed a crime," we shared, Susan corrected, stepping forward and invading my personal space. The heavy scent of her expensive floral perfume was nauseating. "We did what families do. We prioritized the vulnerable. You will call your real estate agent and you will cancel that contract. Tell them your financing fell through. People do it every day." Robert finally looked up, fixing me with a stern glare over the rim of his reading glasses. "Your mother is right. End of discussion. We are not tearing this family apart over your materialism. We will figure out a way to pay you back a little each month, once Tyler gets his year-end bonus." Tyler never received bonuses. Tyler barely kept jobs long enough to accrue paid time off. The promise of monthly repayment was a hollow script they recited every time they bailed him out of debt. I looked at the two of them. My mother righteous, imposing, and angry. My father dismissive, cold, and annoyed. For 32 years, I had craved their approval. I had played by all their rules, paid my own way through college, and tried my hardest to be the dependable daughter. I thought if I just worked hard enough, they would eventually look at me with the same blind adoration they showered upon him. Standing in that pristine, lemon-scented kitchen, the lifelong illusion shattered. I saw the ugly, bare bones of my family dynamic. My independence was not a source of pride for them. It was a threat to their control. My financial stability was merely a convenient slush fund they could tap into whenever their favored son made another reckless mistake. If I screamed, if I cried, if I begged them to understand how much that condo meant to me, it would change nothing. Emotional appeals hold no power over people who do not view you as a separate human being. I stopped shaking. The tears that had been burning the backs of my eyes receded, replaced by a strange, icy clarity. I did not yell. I did not throw the crystal glasses against the pristine white cabinets. I simply turned around and walked toward the front door. Kristen, Susan called out, her tone shifting rapidly back to that faux maternal concern, sensing my sudden shift in energy. "Where are you going? We are not finished talking about this." I pulled the heavy oak door open, the humid Florida heat rushing in to meet me. I stepped onto the concrete porch and let the door swing shut behind me, the heavy brass latch clicking firmly into place. The finality of that sound echoed in my ears all the way down the driveway. I climbed into my sweltering car, started the engine, and stared blankly at the steering wheel. I had no money. I was about to lose my dream home. I was entirely alone. But as I shifted the car into drive, a new dark resolve took root in my chest. If they wanted to play games with my livelihood, I would strip the board bare. I spent the next 48 hours in a state of numb pragmatism. I drafted a humiliating email to my realtor, explaining that an unforeseen family crisis had compromised my financing. I packed the few moving boxes I had started assembling right back into my cramped apartment closet. I went to my shifts at the hospitality group, plastering on a fake bright smile for demanding clients, while my stomach churned with anxiety. The silence from my parents was deafening. They were waiting for me to fall in line, assuming my lack of response was quiet submission. Then, on Thursday afternoon, while I was sitting at my kitchen table, trying to untangle my meager remaining budget, my cell phone vibrated against the cheap laminate surface. The caller ID flashed an unknown number from Orlando. I almost let it go to voicemail, assuming it was a telemarketer or a spam call. But something compelled me to swipe the green icon and press the speaker to my ear. That single decision changed the trajectory of my entire life. I stared at the glowing screen of my cell phone. The digits illuminated the dim lighting of my small apartment kitchen. The caller ID displayed an Orlando area code. Usually, I sent unrecognized numbers straight to voicemail. My mind was already exhausted, buried under the weight of canceled contracts and the humiliating apologies I had delivered to my real estate agent hours prior. Yet some unexplainable instinct forced my thumb to swipe the green icon. I lifted the device to my ear. "Hello? Is this Kristen Lee?" The voice on the other end was rough, layered with the gravelly exhaustion of a man who spent his days shouting over heavy machinery. "Speaking," I replied, keeping my tone flat and guarded. "Listen, this is Mike Reynolds with Reynolds Custom Builds. I am trying to get a hold of Tyler, but his phone keeps routing to voicemail. We hit a snag with the municipal office, and I need the secondary permit signed for the travertine decking before my crew pours the concrete tomorrow morning." I pulled the phone away from my ear, staring at the screen for a fraction of a second to ensure I had heard him correctly. "Travertine decking, concrete..." "Mr. Reynolds, I think you have the wrong number. I do not own property in Orlando, and I certainly did not order any decking." There was a heavy sigh on the other end, followed by the rustling of thick paper. "No, I have the right number. You are listed right here on page 4 of the master contract. Tyler put you down as the primary financial guarantor for the project. I need an authorized signature to proceed, and frankly, I need to discuss the payment schedule. His initial deposit check bounced this morning." The air in my kitchen turned to ice. My lungs forgot how to expand. Guarantor. The word echoed in my skull. Tyler had a long documented history of financial ruin. In his early 20s, he maxed out 3 separate credit cards funding a failed lifestyle blog, resulting in a repossessed sedan that my father quietly paid off to save the family name. Tyler possessed a credit score so dismal he could barely qualify for a standard cell phone plan, let alone secure funding for extensive home renovations. He needed a pristine credit profile to back his contracts. He needed mine. He had not just stolen my cash. He had fraudulently attached my name to a binding legal document leveraging my spotless financial history to shield himself from liability. A strange ringing began to hum in my ears, but I forced my breathing to remain steady. I did not want to spook the man on the phone. "Mr. Reynolds, I need you to clarify something for me. My brother told our parents this project was for unexpected structural emergencies. He claimed the house had serious foundation issues." A loud, booming laugh erupted through the speaker. Mike sounded genuinely amused. "Structural emergencies, lady. The only emergency your brother has is making sure the swim-up bar is finished before his 4th of July barbecue. The foundation of that house is solid block concrete. It will outlast us all." I gripped the edge of my laminate kitchen table. The cheap material dug into my palm. "A swim-up bar." "Yeah," Mike continued, the amusement fading into professional irritation. "We are installing a custom $65,000 luxury saltwater pool. It features a zero-edge waterfall, temperature-controlled imported tile, and a fully permitted outdoor kitchen with a built-in gas grill and a kegerator. It is a beautiful setup, but I run a tight ship. My guys do not work for free. Tyler wrote me a personal check for the first draw, but my bank flagged it for insufficient funds. I assume he is waiting on a wire transfer to clear, but until the cash hits my account, the excavators stay parked. Since you are the guarantor on file, you are legally responsible for the balance." The lie my parents had spun shattered into jagged, razor-sharp pieces. They had looked me in the eyes, invoked the safety of my infant niece, and demanded I sacrifice my future to fix a crumbling roof. It was all a calculated fabrication. My down payment had not been hijacked to keep a struggling young family warm and safe. It was stolen to fund a tropical resort backyard so my brother could play wealthy real estate mogul for his friends. Susan and Robert knew exactly where those funds were going. They had authorized the theft to finance a luxury status symbol. The grief that had suffocated me for the past 2 days evaporated. The crushing, heavy sorrow of parental betrayal burned away, replaced by a cold, crystalline fury. Tears did not fall. My hands stopped shaking. The victim mentality to keep me docile simply ceased to exist. I was no longer a grieving daughter mourning a broken relationship. I was an event director who specialized in managing high-stakes disasters, and I had just been handed the exact logistical weapon I needed. Mr. Reynolds. I kept my voice smooth, adopting the precise, authoritative tone I used to negotiate with difficult corporate vendors. My brother committed fraud. I did not sign that contract, and I did not agree to act as his guarantor. The silence on the line grew heavy. I heard the faint sound of a truck engine idling in the background. What do you mean fraud? I mean he forged my information, I stated clearly. But here is the reality of the situation. Tyler is currently waiting on an $85,000 transfer from a stolen bank account. The funds are likely caught in a standard 3-day fraud hold because the transaction was unusually large, which is why your initial draw bounced. He has the money. It is just locked in the clearing process. Mike cursed under his breath, a low, sharp expletive. I need your help. I continued speaking slowly to ensure every word landed with impact. If you want to get paid, you need to keep this conversation between us. Do not tell Tyler you spoke to me. Do not alert him that the check bounced just yet. Blame the delay on a permitting issue. In exchange, I need you to do exactly one thing for me. What is that? Mike asked, his tone shifting from irritated to cautious. I need you to scan and email me the entire master contract, every single page, especially the page bearing my supposed signature and the itemized invoice detailing the luxury upgrades. I need proof of the saltwater pool, the outdoor kitchen, and the forged guarantor paperwork. Lady, I cannot just hand over client files. There are privacy clauses. Mr. Reynolds, you are holding a forged legal document, I countered. My voice dropping an octave, radiating calm certainty. My next phone call is to the Tampa Police Department to report identity theft. If I tell them your construction firm is proceeding with a project backed by fraudulent documents, your business accounts will be frozen, pending a criminal investigation. Your excavators will be impounded as evidence. Or you can email me the contract right now, and I will ensure your firm is listed as a defrauded third party rather than a co-conspirator. You are a businessman. Make the smart choice. A thick pause hung over the line. The idling truck engine in the background clicked off. Give me your email address, he grumbled. I recited it flawlessly, my eyes fixed on the blank wall of my kitchen. 5 minutes later, a notification chimed on my laptop. A high-resolution PDF file appeared in my inbox. I opened the document, scrolling past the technical schematics and supply costs straight to the financial guarantor section. There it was. My name printed in block letters accompanied by a signature that looked nothing like my actual handwriting. Tyler had not even bothered to mimic the elegant swoops my mother used on the bank withdrawal slip. He had scribbled a frantic, messy version of my name, arrogant enough to believe no one would ever verify it. He thought he was untouchable. I downloaded the file, saving 3 separate backup copies to secure cloud servers. This contractor invoice was the smoking gun. It proved the money was not meant for a structural emergency, destroying the family's survival narrative my parents had carefully constructed. It also proved Tyler had committed a secondary act of fraud across state lines. I closed the laptop, a dark satisfaction blooming in my chest. The game had fundamentally changed. They thought I would quietly retreat into the shadows, crying over my lost condo, while they sipped cocktails at their new swim-up bar. They underestimated my capacity for retaliation. I now possessed the blueprints to their destruction. I stood up from the kitchen table, the adrenaline sharpening my senses. I needed to see exactly how bold they were being in public. Tyler and his wife were notoriously addicted to social validation. If they were reckless enough to forge financial documents, they were definitely arrogant enough to brag about their new wealth online. I picked up my phone and opened a fresh browser tab, navigating straight to the one place I knew they could not resist showing off. I was about to find out just how loudly they were digging their own graves. The PDF from the contractor sat saved on my laptop desktop, a heavy digital anchor grounding me in reality. My brother had committed felony fraud, forging my name to guarantee his luxury renovations. But a contract is just ink and data hidden in a file folder. I needed to see how they were spinning this theft in the daylight. I unlocked my phone and tapped the colorful camera icon on my home screen. Ashley, my sister-in-law, lived her entire life through a digital filter. She was a former retail manager who rebranded herself as a lifestyle influencer the moment she married into my family. Her feed was an endless scroll of beige outfits, iced lattes, and performative domestic bliss. If there was a luxury upgrade happening in her zip code, she would inevitably broadcast it to her 3,000 followers. I typed her handle into the search bar, my thumb hovering over the glass screen. Her profile loaded instantly. The newest photo posted barely 2 hours ago featured a bright yellow excavator parked on a sprawling patch of torn-up Bermuda grass. The Florida sun glinted off the machine's heavy metal bucket. In the foreground, Ashley held a pair of designer sunglasses, smiling effortlessly toward the camera, while Tyler stood behind her. He wore a pristine polo shirt, pointing at the dirt crater like a visionary architect. The caption beneath the image read, "So blessed. Hard work and saving every penny finally pays off. Cannot wait for our backyard oasis. Hashtag self-made, hashtag family first." A sharp, metallic taste flooded my mouth. I swallowed hard, staring at the screen until the pixels blurred. The sheer audacity of those hashtags burned behind my eyes. Self-made. They were standing on soil about to be excavated by a crew paid with the lifeblood of my hospitality career. I had spent countless Friday nights hauling catering equipment through service elevators, missing birthdays and milestones to build a secure future. My beachfront condo was supposed to be a testament to genuine independence, a quiet refuge earned through relentless grit. Their backyard oasis was a shallow, artificial facade constructed entirely on a foundation of theft. I scrolled down to the comments section, my stomach twisting into a tight knot. The first reply sat pinned at the top, originating from my mother's account. Susan had left a string of prayer hands and red hearts. Her comment read, "So proud of you both. Financial responsibility always yields the best rewards. The baby is going to love her new swimming pool." The hypocrisy was suffocating. Just 48 hours prior, Susan had stood in her pristine, lemon-scented kitchen, wielding my niece's safety like a blunt weapon. She had demanded I sacrifice my housing contract to repair a dangerous, crumbling roof. Now she was publicly praising the installation of a luxury recreational feature, framing my stolen savings as her son's fiscal triumph. They were constructing a shared delusion, reinforcing each other's lies in a public forum to make the theft feel legitimate. My thumbs hovered over the comment box. The urge to type a single devastating sentence was overwhelming. I wanted to tag the contractor. I wanted to upload the forged invoice right into the replies. I wanted to burn their curated digital life to the ground right then and there. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs, fueled by righteous indignation. It would be so easy to hit send to expose the rot hiding behind their perfect, filtered smiles. But I stopped. I pulled my thumbs away from the glass, forcing my breathing to slow. If I confronted Ashley in the comments, I would lose the element of surprise. They would immediately delete the post, block my account, and twist the narrative. Susan would call the extended relatives painting me as a bitter, unstable sister, launching an unprovoked cyber attack out of pure jealousy. Responding with emotion was exactly what they expected from the old Kristen. They relied on the dependable, reactive daughter, who always caved under pressure and eventually apologized just to keep the peace. Instead of typing, I pressed the side buttons on my phone. The screen flashed, capturing the image. I took a time-stamped screenshot of the original post. I scrolled down and snapped an image of Susan's hypocritical praise. I captured the location tags, the timestamps, and the list of local businesses Ashley had tagged, hoping for sponsorships. I moved to her Instagram stories, recording screen captures of Tyler holding a tape measure across the torn earth, bragging on video about the dimensions of his upcoming swim-up bar. I sat at my small, laminate dining table, sipping lukewarm black coffee, methodically archiving their digital footprint. Every boastful caption, every flaunted purchase, every hashtag they used to gloat became a piece of cold, hard evidence. I created a dedicated folder on my encrypted hard drive, filing the images next to the contractor's forged PDF. Ashley had always viewed me as competition, though I never understood why. When Tyler brought her home 5 years ago, she immediately started treating every family gathering like a runway show, sizing up my outfits and making backhanded comments about my grueling work schedule. She pitied my single status, claiming she preferred a traditional life where the husband provided. Yet here she was, funding her traditional domestic bliss with the wages of the career woman she constantly mocked. Her vanity was her ultimate blind spot. She believed the internet was a harmless stage. She did not realize it was a courtroom. Gathering the screenshots brought a distinct, icy satisfaction. They were building their dream life on my dime, totally unaware they were digging their own graves. Every post they made fortified my eventual case. They were weaving a rope of undeniable proof, and I was quietly coiling it, preparing for the moment it would snap taut around their necks. The digital archive was growing into a weapon they could not dispute. Ashley's desperate need for online validation was serving as a real-time ledger, meticulously documenting the exact destination of my stolen funds. But social media bragging and contractor invoices only proved where the money went. It proved the destination of the fraud. It did not prove the origin. To build an airtight legal trap, I needed to bridge the gap between my drained legacy account and Tyler's luxury pool. Susan had orchestrated the initial withdrawal. She had physically walked into a financial institution and bypassed modern security protocols to extract $85,000. Banks are fortresses of regulation. Tellers do not simply hand over cashier's checks of that magnitude without running a gauntlet of verifications, especially when the primary account holder is absent. Susan was a co-signer, yes, but withdrawing a sum that large triggered mandatory fraud alerts, usually requiring a phone call to the primary number on file. My phone had never rung. No text alert had ever appeared on my screen. Someone at that downtown branch had bent the rules, or Susan had found a way to bypass the fail-safes. Either way, the bank was negligent. The contractor's file and the Instagram posts were secondary evidence. The real ammunition lay hidden in the internal teller logs. I closed my laptop and grabbed my car keys, the metallic jingle echoing in the quiet apartment. I was done crying over canceled real estate contracts and ungrateful relatives. It was time to pay a visit to a certain branch manager and demand the exact paperwork that authorized my ruin. The glass double doors of the downtown financial center slid open with a quiet hiss, admitting a rush of humid air before sealing me inside the chilled, hushed lobby. The atmosphere smelled of polished marble and ozone. Soft, classical music played from hidden speakers, a deliberate soundtrack designed to project wealth and security. Yesterday, I walked into this building as a panicked victim, desperate for answers. Today, I stepped onto the terrazzo floor as an adversary, hunting for ammunition. I bypassed the velvet ropes guiding customers toward the teller windows. A young woman in a navy vest offered a practiced greeting, but I did not break my stride. I walked straight toward the frosted glass office belonging to the branch manager, Mr. Vargas. Through the translucent panes, I could see him typing leisurely on his computer. I turned the silver handle, stepped opposite without knocking, and let the heavy door click shut behind me. Vargas jumped his hands, hovering over his keyboard, his brow furrowed in irritation, ready to reprimand a rude customer. But his expression faltered the second he recognized my face. The annoyance melted into cautious apprehension. "Ms. Lee?" He started, his voice adopting that rehearsed, soothing tone bankers use for volatile situations. "I understand you are upset about the joint account transfer, but as I explained yesterday, the transaction was legally authorized by a registered cosigner. There is nothing more the branch can do." I did not sit down. I dropped my leather briefcase onto the center of his mahogany desk. The heavy thud made him flinch. "I need to see the physical withdrawal file," I stated, keeping my voice leveled and devoid of any emotional tremor. My career in luxury hospitality taught me a vital lesson about human psychology. When you deal with hostile, entitled guests or vendor disputes, the person who raises their voice loses control. The person who speaks quietly, with icy precision, dictates the outcome. Vargas was a middle manager accustomed to dealing with people who cried or yelled. He was not prepared for someone who treated him like a failing subordinate. "We already reviewed the authorization slip." He deflected his eyes, darting toward the lobby beyond his glass walls. "I can print you another copy of the receipt if you need it for your personal records, but the file itself is internal property." "Mr. Vargas, modern financial institutions are bound by strict federal protocols," I replied, placing both hands flat on his desk and leaning forward. "The Bank Secrecy Act and standard Know Your Customer regulations dictate that the sudden liquidation of an $85,000 legacy account triggers automatic security protocols. A withdrawal of that magnitude requires verbal verification from the primary account holder. My phone never rang. I never received a text alert, so you are going to open that filing cabinet and you are going to show me exactly how your branch bypassed federal regulations to hand my life savings to a third party." A bead of sweat materialized near his left temple. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing above his tight collar. The corporate shield he was trying to hide behind was cracking. He knew the regulations just as well as I did. He realized I was not an ignorant civilian he could brush off with generic banking jargon. "I am going to ask you one more time," I whispered, letting the silence hang in the chilled air. "Produce the physical file, or my next conversation will be with the state financial regulator regarding institutional negligence." Vargas held my gaze for a fraction of a second before crumbling. He pushed his chair back, the wheels squeaking against the plastic floor mat. He walked over to a locked metal filing cabinet in the corner of his office, his hands trembling slightly as he fumbled with a ring of small brass keys. He pulled open a heavy drawer, leafed through a row of green-hanging folders, and extracted a thick manila envelope. He carried it back to the desk like it was a live explosive and slid it across the polished wood. I opened the flap. Inside were several pages of printed electronic logs, a copy of my parents' driver's licenses, and the withdrawal slip I had seen the day prior. But underneath those standard documents lay a specialized pale yellow form. The header read, "High Yield Liquidation Security Waiver." My eyes scanned the dense legal text. It was an internal fraud prevention document. It explicitly declined the mandatory verbal phone verification for large-sum transfers, citing the physical presence of the account holders and requesting an immediate, expedited cashier's check. At the bottom of the page on the primary account holder line was my signature. The air left my lungs, replaced by a profound, chilling clarity. Susan had not merely walked up to a teller and asked for a check. She had encountered a security roadblock, a system designed specifically to protect people like me from people like her. Instead of backing down, she requested the security waiver. She sat in a chair, perhaps right here in this very lobby, took a pen, and committed felony forgery to bypass the final failsafe. Her obsession with perfect calligraphy had evolved from a controlling domestic habit into a calculated financial crime. The swooping letters of my name were an exact replica of the signature on my driver's license. She had practiced this. She had studied my handwriting, preparing for the moment a teller might ask for secondary authorization. I looked up from the yellow paper. Who was the teller that processed this transaction? Vargas shifted his weight, his eyes wide. Ms. Lee, I cannot disclose employee information. You do not have to, I countered, tapping the bottom corner of the page where a set of initials sat next to a digital timestamp. The employee who processed this waiver accepted a forged signature from an individual who was clearly not me. Susan Lee is a 60-year-old blonde woman. My identification on file clearly states I am 32 with dark hair. Your employee failed to verify the identification of the person signing a federal security waiver. That is gross negligence. Vargas opened his mouth to defend his staff, but no words came out. The color drained from his face entirely, leaving his skin a pale, sickly gray. The reality of the situation was crashing down on him. His branch had facilitated a massive theft by failing to execute basic identity verification. If I pursued litigation, the liability would not just fall on my mother. The bank itself was exposed to a catastrophic lawsuit. We can launch an internal investigation, Vargas offered, his voice dropping to a frantic whisper. If there was a breach of protocol, we have an arbitration process. We can freeze the receiving account pending a review. The receiving account is empty, I stated coldly, recalling the contractor's 6-figure invoice. The money is already gone. I do not want an internal review, Mr. Vargas. I want certified copies of this entire folder. He blinked, confusion warring with panic. Certified copies of every single page, I commanded. The forged security waiver, the original withdrawal slip, the electronic teller logs detailing the exact timestamp, and the external routing numbers confirming the destination of the funds. Stamp them, sign them, certify them as true copies of the original bank records. If I certify these, you can use them in a court of law, he cautioned, though he was already reaching for the folder. That is exactly the point. Vargas did not argue further. He understood that cooperating was his only chance to mitigate his own immediate liability. He gathered the papers and walked out to the teller line. I watched through the frosted glass as he fed the documents through a heavy industrial scanner, his shoulders slumped in defeat. He stamped each freshly printed page with the official branch seal, scribbling his signature across the blue ink to verify their authenticity. He returned to the office and handed me the stack of papers. The sheets were still warm from the copier. I slid the documents into my leather briefcase, the snap of the brass clasps echoing loud in the quiet room. My family had handed me the very weapon that would dismantle their entire scheme. Now the bank had handed me a secondary target. If Erica, the litigator I planned to hire, needed leverage, threatening a major financial institution with a negligence lawsuit would provide a bottomless war chest for a settlement. I walked out of the lobby and pushed through the glass double doors, stepping back into the blinding Florida sunshine. The heat wrapped around me, but my blood felt like ice water. The stakes had elevated beyond a toxic family dispute over a stolen down payment. The papers secured inside my bag were the keys to a federal financial crime. I possessed the undeniable proof required to send my own mother to a penitentiary. I reached my car, unlocked the door, and sank into the driver's seat. I placed the briefcase on the passenger side, staring at the leather surface. The sheer gravity of what I had just collected began to press down on my chest. I had the power to destroy the people who raised me. The paper trail was flawless, the trap was set, but as I gripped the steering wheel, a suffocating wave of guilt crashed over the cold logic, forcing me to confront the deepest, most dangerous obstacle of all. The leather passenger seat radiated a stifling heat against my hand, but the brass clasps of the briefcase felt like ice. Inside that slim compartment lay the certified copies from the bank manager, the withdrawal slip, the security waiver, the undeniable proof of forgery. I possessed the exact sequence of documents required to dismantle my family. Sitting in the baking Florida sun, the gravity of those papers pressed down on my chest, making every breath a shallow struggle. Growing up in the South, family loyalty is not merely a suggestion, it is treated as an unquestionable religion. You protect your own. You bury the ugly truths beneath polite smiles and sweet tea, and you never, under any circumstances, invite the authorities into your home. The cultural conditioning ran deep, weaving itself into the very fabric of my identity. To file a police report meant crossing an invisible sacred line. It meant sending Susan to a penitentiary. It meant watching Robert drain his retirement to cover criminal defense fees. It meant pushing Tyler into swift bankruptcy. A wave of suffocating guilt washed over me, heavy and paralyzing. My thumb hovered over the keypad of my cell phone, the numbers 911 glowing on the screen. But my hand trembled. Was a beachfront condo worth destroying the people who raised me? Was I acting out of righteous justice or petty vengeance? I rested my forehead against the steering wheel, squeezing my eyes shut as the internal war waged on. The silence of the car amplified the erratic thumping of my own pulse. Then the scent of the leather interior seemed to shift, morphing into the distinct sour smell of spilled champagne and melted butter. The sensory trigger hit me like a physical blow, dragging my mind backward a decade. I was 22 years old again. It was New Year's Eve. I had just worked a grueling 14-hour catering shift at a luxury resort in Clearwater. My memories reconstructed the night with brutal clarity. I recalled balancing heavy silver trays of hors d'oeuvres while navigating crowded ballrooms, smiling until my jaw ached, apologizing to intoxicated guests who bumped into me. The cheap uniform shoes provided zero support. A blister on my left heel had burst around midnight, soaking my sheer tights with blood. Every step during those final 4 hours felt like walking on shattered glass. I remembered pulling into my parents' driveway at 3 a.m, my body running on fumes and sheer adrenaline. I parked my beat-up sedan and limped toward the front door. But before I reached the porch, I stopped. Parked in Tyler's usual spot sat a gleaming midnight blue pickup truck. The paint reflected the glow of the streetlights. A ridiculous, oversized red ribbon adorned the hood. I recalled turning the brass doorknob and stepping into the foyer. Susan and Robert were wide awake in the living room, drinking hot cocoa by the fireplace, their faces flushed with excitement. I peeled off my ruined shoes, leaving bloody footprints on the welcome mat, and asked about the truck. Robert had smiled, a warm, genuine expression he rarely directed at me. Tyler has been feeling a little depressed lately, he explained, waving off my obvious exhaustion. He has been struggling to find his path. We figured a new ride would boost his confidence, get him back on his feet. Standing there in my stained uniform, my feet throbbing in agony, the raw truth had stared me in the face. My bleeding heels meant nothing. My labor was expected. Tyler's manufactured sadness, his inability to hold a simple retail job, warranted a $30,000 remedy. Opening my eyes in the present, the sweltering heat of the car grounded me. The suffocating guilt evaporated, burned away by the searing heat of that memory. The realization crystallized, sharp and undeniable. My parents did not harbor unconditional love for me. They loved my utility. I was the reliable, invisible generator powering their household dynamics. I was the quiet engine funding their peace of mind while they poured all their emotional and financial resources into a leaking vessel. My financial independence threatened that dynamic. By stealing my down payment, they were not just prioritizing Tyler. They were reclaiming what they believed was rightfully theirs. My labor, my future, my life. I wiped a stray tear from my cheek. The lingering hesitation vanished. The time for grieving the family I never truly had was over. Now I needed a strategy. If I drove straight to the police precinct and filed the report today, the war would commence on their terms. Susan would immediately hire a defense attorney. Robert would spin a public narrative claiming the money was a misunderstood loan. Tyler would play the victim. I needed them vulnerable. I needed them to drop their guard, spend the funds, and dig the hole so deep they could never climb out. I needed a diversion, a tactical retreat. I picked up my phone and cleared the emergency numbers from the screen. Instead, I dialed my parents' landline. I took a deep breath, reaching into the deepest reserves of my hospitality training. I summoned the exhaustion, the sorrow, and the frantic desperation of the past 3 days. I let my shoulders slump, allowing my vocal cords to tighten. The line rang twice before Susan answered. Her greeting was crisp, guarded, anticipating a fight. "Hello, Kristen." "Mom," I whispered, injecting a realistic, ragged sob into the syllable. "You win." There was a beat of silence on the other end. "Excuse me?" she asked, her tone shifting slightly. I squeezed my eyes shut, forcing another tear to leak out for authentic audio effect. I canceled the condo contract. I called the realtor an hour ago. I cannot fight my own flesh and blood over money. You are right. Tyler needs a safe place for the baby. I will figure something else out. I am just so tired of fighting. The transformation on the other end of the line was instantaneous. The icy, defensive dictator melted away, replaced by a sickeningly sweet matriarch. "Oh, honey," Susan cooed, her voice dripping with artificial relief. "I knew you would come to your senses. You have always been such a smart, reasonable girl. This is what family does. We sacrifice for each other." I heard the rustle of fabric, and then Robert's voice echoed in the background. "What did she say?" "She canceled the contract," Susan announced to him, not bothering to cover the receiver. "She is letting Tyler keep the funds. Tell her I am proud of her," Robert yelled back. "Tell her we will take her out for a nice steak dinner next month to make up for it." A nice steak dinner. The price of my $85,000 sacrifice. "I will let you get some rest, sweetie," Susan said, returning her attention to me. "Everything is going to be fine. You will see. We love you." "I love you too," I lied. My voice steady, though my grip on the phone was tight enough to crack the casing. I disconnected the call. I tossed the device onto the passenger seat next to the briefcase. Before the screen faded to black, I heard the faint, unmistakable sound of a cork popping in the background of their living room. They were already celebrating their victory. My feigned defeat worked flawlessly. They believed I had surrendered, broken by their superior will. By tomorrow morning, Tyler would call Mike Reynolds. The excavators would roar back to life. They would pour the concrete, install the imported tile, and proceed with the luxury pool construction feeling entirely invincible. They were celebrating their triumph, oblivious to the storm I was gathering just over the horizon. But even as I laid the groundwork for my revenge, Susan's maternal instincts remained sharp. My easy surrender might have satisfied her ego for the evening, but the quiet distance I kept over the following days would quickly trigger her deepest paranoias. The illusion of my submission lasted exactly 72 hours. I had played the defeated daughter perfectly on the phone, but Susan possessed the predatory instincts of a seasoned manipulator. She could not read my mind, but she could sense the absence of my usual behavior. I was not calling her in tears seeking reassurance. I was not begging for a compromise. The quiet vacuum I left behind triggered her deepest paranoias. In her worldview, silence was an act of rebellion. To neutralize any potential uprising before it could gain traction, my mother deployed her favorite weapon. She weaponized the extended family. In our sprawling southern clan, reputation is currency. Information travels through a highly organized, invisible telephone tree, usually originating from Susan's pristine kitchen. Over the course of a single Friday afternoon, she systematically dialed every aunt, uncle, and longtime family friend across the Florida peninsula. She did not portray herself as a thief. She cast herself as a tragic, worried matriarch trying to manage a deeply unstable daughter. Her narrative was a masterpiece of character assassination. She claimed the grueling demands of my event directing career had finally caused a severe mental break. According to her, the $85,000 was a generous gift I had eagerly offered to Tyler months ago to help secure a safe environment for my infant niece. But now, in the grips of a hospitality-induced psychosis fueled by the bitterness of being a 32-year-old single woman, I was supposedly demanding the gift back. She painted a picture of a jealous spinster trying to rip the roof off a young family's home out of sheer unadulterated spite. The backlash was swift and punishing. My cell phone became a conduit for relentless harassment. The first strike came from Aunt Patricia down in Naples. Patricia was a woman whose entire identity revolved around traditional gender roles and country club luncheons. She had always viewed my career ambitions with thinly veiled suspicion. My phone vibrated on my desk while I was reviewing catering contracts. I let it go to voicemail. 5 minutes later, I pressed the phone to my ear and listened to the recording. "Kristen, I just spoke to your mother, Patricia," began, her tone dripping with condescending disappointment. "I am frankly appalled by your behavior. Your brother is trying to raise a child in a safe environment, and you are throwing a tantrum over money you already promised him? Your mother is sick with worry over your mental state. You need to seek professional counseling, and you need to leave Tyler alone. Threatening to make a baby homeless because you are jealous of his marriage is a new low, even for you." I sat in my home office, listening to the digital recording click off. The sheer audacity of the lie stole the breath right out of my lungs. They were actually using the infant as a human shield to protect a luxury swimming pool. The voicemails kept coming. An uncle from Jacksonville advised me to stop being so greedy. A cousin from Miami sent a text message telling me to grow up and stop punishing the family for my own unhappiness. The coordinated attack was designed to crush my spirit, to isolate me so thoroughly that I would surrender out of pure social survival. Then Tyler decided to join the fray. I logged into Facebook that evening to monitor their public footprint. Right at the top of my feed sat a text-based status update from my brother. The background was a dramatic dark gray gradient. The post read, "Sometimes the most toxic people in your life share your DNA. Setting boundaries is hard, but protecting your peace and your growing family is what matters most. Thankful for the relatives who actually support us during stressful times." The post had 42 likes within an hour. Dozens of supportive comments piled up underneath, echoing his bravery. He was crowdsourcing sympathy for a crime he committed against me. He had forged my name on a construction contract, stolen my life savings, and was now publicly mourning the burden of my supposed toxicity. The urge to defend myself burned like acid in my throat. I wanted to blast the contractor's PDF to every person on my contacts list. I wanted to upload the bank manager's certified withdrawal slip right into Tyler's comment section and watch his carefully curated facade burn to ash. The injustice of their lies felt like a physical weight pressing against my ribs, but I remembered the cold reality of my new strategy. If I reacted, I became the erratic, emotional woman they were describing. If I argued, I gave their lies the dignity of a debate. I refused to play the role they assigned to me. Instead, I created a new folder on my encrypted hard drive. I titled it Character Defamation. I downloaded every voicemail audio file. I took timestamped screenshots of every text message. I captured Tyler's passive-aggressive Facebook post and all the enabling comments beneath it. I was quietly archiving the harassment, letting them document their own coordinated smear campaign. The ultimate test of my resolve arrived 2 days later. The Sunday family dinner. Skipping the weekly gathering would only validate Susan's claim that I was spiraling into isolation. I had to walk into the lion's den and prove I was a compliant, defeated target. I dressed in a simple beige sweater and slacks, aiming for an appearance of muted submission. I drove to the subdivision in Brandon, bracing myself for the psychological gauntlet. The moment I stepped through the front door, the atmosphere shifted. The usual lively chatter died down, replaced by a thick, awkward tension. Tyler and Ashley were sitting on the plush living room sofa, holding hands, like weary survivors of a great tragedy. Robert stood by the fireplace, nursing a glass of scotch, watching me with a stern, judgmental glare. Susan emerged from the kitchen, carrying a porcelain bowl, wearing a tight, sorrowful smile. "Kristen, honey," Susan murmured, her voice dripping with artificial pity. "I am so glad you felt well enough to join us today." I forced the corners of my mouth upward, plastering on the same blank, agreeable smile I used for irate hotel guests. "Thank you for having me," I replied, my voice soft and even. We moved to the dining room. The next hour was a masterclass in psychological endurance. The scent of roasted chicken and garlic hung heavy in the air, turning my stomach into a knot of nausea. I sat across from the people who had orchestrated my ruin, gripping my silverware under the table to stop my hands from shaking. They did not bring up the money directly. They did not have to. Instead, they weaponized the conversation to gloat. Ashley spent 15 minutes detailing the specific shade of imported travertine tile they selected for the new patio. She described how the swimming pool would reflect the sunset, glancing at me periodically to gauge my reaction. Tyler boasted about the upgraded outdoor kitchen, loudly thanking Robert and Susan for their unwavering financial wisdom and support. "It is amazing what you can accomplish when the family works together as a team," Robert announced, raising his glass in a toast. The clinking of their crystal goblets sounded like breaking glass in my ears. They were rubbing the theft in my face, daring me to snap. They wanted me to yell. They wanted me to flip a chair or burst into tears so they could point their fingers and validate the insane narrative they had fed to the extended family. "Could you pass the mashed potatoes?" Tyler asked, a smug, triumphant gleam in his eye. I looked at my brother. I looked at the man who had scribbled my name on a fraud waiver so he could drink beers at a swim-up bar. I reached for the heavy ceramic bowl. The porcelain was warm against my fingertips. I lifted it and placed it gently near his plate. "Of course," I said quietly. "Enjoy." I ate my meal in silence. I absorbed their subtle jabs, their arrogant boasts, and their fake concern. I let them believe they had crushed me into total submission. Let them isolate me, let them discredit me to every aunt and uncle in the state of Florida. What Susan failed to realize was the fatal flaw in her strategy. By dragging the extended family into the dispute, she had effectively destroyed the expectation of privacy. She had unsealed the court of public opinion. She'd brought the audience into the theater, oblivious to the fact that I was writing the final act of the play. Their smear campaign was no longer just gossip. It was documented evidence of malicious defamation, adding another layer of liability to their impending ruin. The psychological toll of that dinner was immense. By the time I returned to my dark apartment, I was physically exhausted. The sheer willpower required to smile through their mockery had drained my reserves. I realized I could not fight this war alone. I was an event director, not a gladiator. The rules of engagement had surpassed family drama and entered the realm of severe legal warfare. To execute the paper trail I had gathered, I needed a professional. I needed a mercenary who felt no pity, harbored no familial loyalty, and thrived on tearing arrogant people apart. I needed a shark, and I knew exactly where to find one. The Monday morning after that suffocating Sunday dinner broke with a torrential Tampa downpour. Rain lashed against the bedroom window of my apartment, mirroring the turbulent energy coursing through my veins. The emotional exhaustion of playing the defeated daughter had burned away during the night, leaving behind a sharp, cold focus. I brewed a pot of bitter, dark roast coffee and opened my laptop. I did not search for family counselors. I bypassed the advertisements for mediators who specialized in amicable resolutions. Amicable was a fantasy. My parents had stolen my future to fund a luxury swimming pool, and they were currently using my infant niece as a human shield to justify the theft. I needed a professional who would not be swayed by Southern charm or weaponized tears. I needed a predator. My search queries targeted civil litigators specializing in financial fraud and asset recovery. I read through biographies looking for specific keywords: aggressive track record, corporate embezzlement, punitive damages. After 2 hours of cross-referencing legal directories, I found her. Erica Stanton. She was a senior partner at a high-rise firm in the downtown commercial district, renowned for dismantling fraudulent executives and tracing hidden assets. Her online portrait showed a woman in her late 40s, with razor-sharp cheekbones and dark, calculating eyes. She did not look friendly. She looked expensive and lethal. I picked up my phone and scheduled an emergency consultation. By noon, I was standing in the lobby of a soaring glass skyscraper, my wet trench coat dripping onto the polished slate floor. The law firm occupied the 40th floor. The elevator ride up felt like ascending into a different atmosphere, leaving the humid, messy reality of my family drama down on the street level. The reception area smelled of rich espresso and expensive leather. A quiet, focused hum of productivity vibrated through the corridors, a stark contrast to the chaotic, emotional warfare of my mother's kitchen. A paralegal escorted me into a corner conference room, wrapped in floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the gray, churning waters of Hillsborough Bay. The center of the space was dominated by a massive, frosted glass table. I set my briefcase down and waited. Erica Stanton walked into the room exactly 3 minutes later. She wore a tailored charcoal blazer and carried a yellow legal pad. She did not offer a warm smile or ask how I was coping with the rain. She extended a firm hand, introduced herself, and sat directly across from me. "Tell me why you are here, Ms. Lee," she instructed, uncapping a silver fountain pen. I appreciated her blunt efficiency. I did not offer a tragic backstory or complain about my childhood. I opened the brass clasps of my briefcase and extracted the manila folders I had painstakingly assembled. I slid the first document across the smooth glass surface. 4 days ago, my mother forged my signature on this internal bank security waiver I stated. My voice steady and devoid of tremor. She bypassed a mandatory federal verification protocol to liquidate my legacy savings account. The branch manager certified this copy. Erica picked up the paper, her eyes scanning the yellow sheet. She noted the signature and the teller stamp. She did not express shock, she simply nodded for me to continue. I slid the second stack of papers forward. These are the external routing logs, proving the $85,000 went directly into a joint checking account held by my father and my older brother Tyler. I then presented the printed PDF from Mike Reynolds. This is a binding construction contract. My brother fraudulently listed me as his primary financial guarantor to secure a $65,000 luxury saltwater pool and outdoor kitchen. He used my spotless credit profile to hire an independent contractor, knowing his own credit was ruined. His initial deposit bounced, prompting the contractor to call me for payment. Finally, I laid out the glossy color printouts of the social media screenshots. These are photographs and time-stamped posts from my sister-in-law publicly flaunting the excavation of their backyard. They are spending the stolen funds in real time, boasting about being self-made, while coordinating a digital smear campaign against me to cover their tracks. I have archived voicemails from extended relatives, proving my mother orchestrated a defamation strategy to frame me as mentally unstable. I stopped talking and folded my hands in my lap. I had laid out a meticulous, undeniable paper trail. Erica arranged the documents into a neat row, studying them with the clinical detachment of a surgeon examining an X-ray. She spent several minutes comparing the forged signature on the bank waiver to the forged block letters on the contractor agreement. She reviewed the dates on the Instagram posts, cross-referencing them with the teller timestamps. The silence in the conference room stretched, broken only by the rhythmic tapping of her silver pen against the legal pad. When she finally looked up, her dark eyes locked onto mine. She did not offer pity. She did not ask how this betrayal made me feel. "What is your objective?" Erica asked, her tone flat and precise. I met her gaze without flinching. "I want my exact down payment returned to me. I want my name legally and permanently severed from their financial orbit. I want the contractor to know he is holding fraudulent paperwork, so he stops invoicing me. And I want an ironclad boundary forcing them to face the consequences of their actions." Erica leaned back in her leather chair, tapping her chin. "You have brought me a very lucrative mess, Miss Lee. Your family committed felony forgery and wire fraud. However, the most vulnerable entity in this room is not your mother. It is the banking institution. They facilitated a massive unauthorized transfer by failing to verify identity. We are going to leverage their negligence to fund this war." She leaned forward, her demeanor shifting into a purely tactical gear. "We will execute a three-pronged attack. First, we file a formal fraud alert with the bank's corporate legal department, putting them on notice for institutional negligence. Second, we file a civil suit against your parents and your brother for civil theft and conversion of funds." She paused, tapping the contractor's invoice. "But civil suits take time. Your brother is actively spending this money right now. We need to stop the bleeding. The third prong is an immediate emergency injunction. I will present this forged bank waiver and the contractor's invoice to a judge. We will argue ongoing asset dissipation. The judge will freeze Tyler's bank accounts pending a full investigation. He will not be able to buy a single gallon of milk, let alone a travertine patio." The sheer ruthlessness of the strategy sent a shiver of adrenaline down my spine. We could choke their cash flow before they even knew they were under attack. "But before you sign anything, I need you to understand the reality of this path," Erica warned, her voice dropping lower, commanding my full attention. "Civil litigation is not a quick, clean victory. It is a brutal war of attrition. Your family will not surrender easily. They will hire their own counsel. They will employ legal stalling tactics, requesting endless continuances to drain your resources. They will sit in deposition chairs, look you dead in the eye, and lie under oath. They will claim this was a gift. They will drag your name through the mud in open court if you have any lingering desire to repair your relationship with these people. You need to walk out that door right now. Once I file these papers, there is no going back." I looked down at the forged signature on the yellow bank waiver. I thought about the bloody blisters on my heels from that New Year's Eve shift. I thought about Robert toasting to family teamwork while funding his son's vanity project with my stolen labor. I thought about the smear campaign echoing through my voicemails. My parents had built their comfortable dynamic on the foundation of my silent suffering. The era of the dependable, invisible sister who absorbed everyone's mistakes was officially dead. "I am not looking for an apology," I told her, reaching for the silver pen. "I am looking for restitution." Erica slid a thick retainer agreement across the frosted glass. I scanned the terms, noting the hefty hourly rate and the aggressive litigation clauses. My hand did not shake. I gripped the pen and signed my real, authentic name at the bottom of the page. The friction of the ink against the paper felt like a declaration of independence. For the first time in my life, I was not shielding my family from the consequences of their reckless behavior. I was actively targeting them. Erica gathered the documents and slipped them into a secure file folder. She stood up, smoothing the front of her charcoal blazer, her eyes gleaming with the thrill of impending combat. She walked me to the heavy glass doors of the conference room. "Go back to work, Ms. Lee," she instructed, a sharp, dangerous smile playing on her lips. "Act perfectly normal. Do not answer their phone calls. Do not respond to their texts. Let them believe they have won. I am going to draft the injunction tonight. We submit the filings to the courthouse on Thursday. By Friday morning, the trap will snap shut on their accounts and their new reality will begin." Erica Stanton operated with the mechanical efficiency of a seasoned surgeon. She did not merely draft documents. She engineered a financial guillotine. Thursday morning, while my parents were likely sipping their morning blend and congratulating themselves on my supposed surrender, Erica marched into the Hillsborough County Courthouse. She filed an ex parte emergency motion for a temporary injunction. In the realm of civil litigation, magistrates are historically hesitant to freeze personal assets without granting the defendant a full hearing. But my attorney did not walk into those chambers with mere allegations or emotional grievances. She carried the certified bank waiver bearing my forged signature, juxtaposed directly against the contractor's six-figure invoice. She presented a crystal-clear, undeniable narrative of imminent, irreparable harm. My brother was actively liquidating stolen funds to build a luxury resort in his backyard, utilizing money extracted through a documented felony. The judge reviewed the rigid paper trail, recognized the blatant fraud, and signed the order without a shadow of hesitation. A judicial mandate was immediately transmitted to the banking institution, severing my family's access to the cash. Friday arrived with a brilliant, cloudless sky typical for a Florida morning. I stood in the grand ballroom of a beachfront resort, directing a crew of florists for a 500-person corporate gala. The air smelled of fresh eucalyptus and expensive catering coffee. My pulse maintained a steady, calm rhythm as I adjusted the seating charts on my clipboard. I knew exactly what was unfolding 70 miles away in Orlando. The dramatic irony tasted sweeter than any revenge I could have ever imagined. Ashley had spent the entire week bragging online about her upcoming showroom appointment. She was scheduled to finalize the purchase of the imported glass tiles for the swim-up bar and the custom quartz countertops for the outdoor kitchen. I pictured her standing at the polished sales desk, wearing her signature oversized sunglasses and a designer handbag, projecting the image of a wealthy, self-made homeowner. The sales representative would tally the exorbitant final bill. Ashley would casually pull a debit card from her wallet, anticipating the thrill of a monumental purchase. She would swipe the plastic through the terminal. The machine would process for a few agonizing seconds before flashing a bright red error code. Declined. She would laugh, blaming a daily spending limit, and instruct the clerk to run it again. Declined. Panic would begin to prickle the back of her neck. She would step aside, dial the customer service number on the back of the card, ready to scold a bank representative. Instead, she would hear a chilling automated message informing her that the account was locked by order of the court. At precisely 10:15 in the morning, my cell phone resting on a nearby catering table began to vibrate. It buzzed against the crisp linen tablecloth, a persistent, angry rattle. I picked up the device, the screen illuminated with Tyler's contact photo. I watched the call ring out, letting it route to voicemail. 10 seconds later, the phone vibrated again. Then again. Within the span of a single hour, I registered 14 missed calls. The notifications stacked up on my lock screen like a panicked digital heartbeat. When the phone calls went unanswered, the text messages started pouring in. They did not originate from my brother. They came from my father, Robert the man, who had sat in his recliner and coldly justified the theft of my down payment just a few days prior, was suddenly stripped of his arrogant composure. His messages arrived in rapid, frantic bursts, abandoning all punctuation and grammar. He typed in furious capitalized letters. "Kristen, answer your phone. Tyler's accounts are frozen. His card was declined at the tile supply. You need to call off your insane lawyers right now. Mike is threatening to pull his crew off the property and file a lien. This is not a game. Call me back immediately." I read the frantic, glowing words while standing amid the fragrant blooms of the ballroom. A week ago, a capitalized message from Robert would have sent my nervous system into a tailspin. I would have dropped my clipboard, rushed to the hallway, and dialed his number in a panic, desperate to smooth over his rage and apologize for causing a disturbance. They had spent decades conditioning me to fear their anger. They trained me to absorb their stress, demanding I sacrifice my own stability to maintain their comfort. But standing there, under the crystal chandeliers, I felt profoundly untouchable. His digital shouting held zero power over me. His fury was entirely impotent. I did not type out a lengthy defense. I did not explain how much they had hurt me, nor did I demand an apology for the forgery. Engaging in an emotional debate was their preferred battlefield. They wanted me to yell so they could twist my words, play the victims, and drag me back into their toxic cycle. I refused to grant them access to my emotions. I opened the text thread, my thumbs hovering over the digital keyboard. I typed the single, precise sentence Erica had pre-approved for this exact moment. "All future communications regarding this matter must be directed to my attorney, Erica Stanton." I hit send. I did not block his number because my lawyer needed the incoming threats to build a potential harassment file, but I silenced the notifications. I slid the phone into the pocket of my blazer and turned my attention back to the florists, instructing them to adjust the centerpieces. That single sentence fundamentally altered the dynamic of our entire relationship. I had unilaterally changed the locks on my life. By forcing the conflict out of the chaotic family arena and into the rigid, unforgiving realm of the legal system, I stripped them of their only weapons. Guilt trips are entirely useless against a civil injunction. Screaming matches hold no jurisdiction over a judge's mandate. Emotional manipulation cannot unfreeze a bank account. They were suddenly trapped in a reality where their actions carried actual, measurable consequences. For the first time, my parents could not bail Tyler out. Their golden child was stranded in the middle of a massive construction project with no capital, and the contractor was already threatening mutiny. Mike Reynolds ran a tight ship, and he did not tolerate bounce checks. The beautiful, unified front my family had projected during the Sunday dinner was facing the crushing pressure of imminent financial ruin. The frozen funds created a catastrophic logistical nightmare for Tyler. His mortgage payment was due at the end of the week. The utility bills for the Orlando property were pending, and worst of all, he lacked the cash to silence the angry contractor. Because Robert and Susan had tied up their liquid cash in their own retirement portfolios to help secure Tyler's initial home loan, they lacked the immediate resources to rescue him. Tyler was broke, desperate, and backed into a corner. The social media smokescreen was evaporating, leaving behind a terrifying financial void. To survive the week and keep his house from plunging into foreclosure, he would have to look for a lifeline elsewhere. He would be forced to beg for emergency loans from the exact same extended relatives Susan had just spent the last 5 days poisoning against me. The financial chokehold enacted by my attorney was absolute. When a civil magistrate orders an emergency asset freeze, the execution is entirely devoid of emotion or nuance. The judicial mandate does not care that you have an infant daughter requiring diapers. It does not care that you have utility bills pending or a luxury contractor breathing down your neck. The banking system simply drops a digital portcullis over your livelihood. For my brother, this harsh new reality materialized with devastating speed. Tyler had lived his entire adult life riding the comfortable cushion of our parents' liquidity. He never bothered to maintain an emergency fund because Susan and Robert served as his permanent safety net. His checking accounts were essentially transit hubs for unearned cash, constantly replenished by their enabling bailouts. Now those hubs were locked down tighter than a federal vault. The catastrophic ripple effect began on a Monday. Tyler's automated mortgage payment attempted to draft from his primary checking account. The transaction bounced, triggering an immediate insufficient funds penalty. Hours later, his auto insurance payment failed. The electricity bill for his sprawling Orlando fixer-upper was rejected. Every single automated financial responsibility tied to his name hit a concrete wall. To compound the disaster, Mike Reynolds, the contractor, realized the initial construction draw was permanently frozen. Mike did not possess a forgiving nature. He informed Tyler that if a cashier's check did not materialize by the end of the week, he would pull his crew off the property and file a mechanic's lien against the house, effectively crippling the property's title. Tyler was suddenly cornered, facing imminent foreclosure and severe legal action. Normally, this would be the exact moment my father opened his wallet to remedy the situation. However, Robert and Susan were trapped by their own financial posturing. To help Tyler secure the original mortgage for that massive house my parents had leveraged, a significant portion of their available liquidity. Their remaining wealth was tied up in rigid retirement portfolios that carried brutal tax penalties for early withdrawal. They were house-rich, but entirely cash-poor. They could not simply write a check to save their golden child this time. Desperation breeds humiliation. Facing a total financial collapse, Susan and Tyler were forced to do the unthinkable. They had to pick up the phone and beg the extended family for emergency loans. This decision was a spectacular tactical error. Just days prior, Susan had orchestrated a masterful smear campaign, dialing those exact same relatives to boast about Tyler's incredible self-made success. She had proudly touted his financial responsibility while simultaneously painting me as a jealous, mentally unstable spinster who wanted to steal his legitimate wealth. Now she was calling those same aunts, uncles, and cousins frantic and panicked, asking them to wire thousands of dollars to keep the lights on in Tyler's house. The hypocrisy was glaring, and the extended family immediately sensed the discrepancy. Southern families might thrive on gossip, but they are fiercely protective of their own wallets. The turning point arrived on a humid Tuesday evening. I was sitting on my apartment balcony, watching the sunset paint the Tampa skyline in shades of bruised purple, when my phone vibrated. The caller identification displayed the name of Aunt Patricia down in Naples. This was the same woman who had left a scathing voicemail, condemning my character and accusing me of trying to render a baby homeless. I let it ring 3 times, allowing the tension to build, before answering with a calm, neutral greeting. Kristen Patricia began. Her tone lacked the condescending venom from her previous call. Instead, she sounded hesitant, cautious, and deeply confused. I just received a very strange phone call from your mother. She asked me to wire Tyler $5,000 to cover his mortgage. She claimed he is having a temporary banking issue. I leaned back in my patio chair, watching a seagull dive toward the bay. Is that so? Patricia cleared her throat, clearly uncomfortable. Yes, but when I asked Tyler about it, he sounded panicked. He mentioned something about a judge. Kristen, your mother told everyone you suffered a mental breakdown and were demanding the return of a gift. But if it was a gift, why in the world would a civil magistrate freeze his bank accounts? Judges do not freeze assets over family disagreements. The silence stretched across the cellular connection. Patricia was connecting the dots, her inherent skepticism overriding her loyalty to Susan's narrative. She realized she had been manipulated, fed a diet of lies to cover up a much darker reality. I did not gloat. I did not raise my voice or launch into an emotional tirade about how unfairly they had treated me. I maintained the icy professional detachment I had honed during years of managing corporate crises. "Aunt Patricia?" I replied, my voice smooth and deliberate. "I am not going to argue with whatever story my mother fabricated to secure your sympathy. I prefer to let the official record speak for itself. Check your email inbox in exactly 2 minutes." I ended the call without waiting for her response. I opened my laptop, navigated to my encrypted files, and attached a specific document to a blank email. It was a watermarked PDF copy of the civil complaint Erica Stanton had filed with the Hillsborough County Court. The document was a masterpiece of legal precision. It detailed the exact timeline of the forgery, referencing the certified bank security waiver. More importantly, it included a full exhibit appendix featuring the contractor's invoice. It explicitly outlined the $65,000 luxury saltwater pool, the imported travertine tile, and the custom outdoor kitchen. I typed Patricia's email address and hit send. I sat on the balcony counting the seconds. I imagined Patricia sitting in her pristine Naples living room, adjusting her reading glasses and opening the attachment. I pictured her eyes scanning the allegations of felony forgery. I envisioned the exact moment she reached the contractor's itemized list. The narrative of a desperate young family needing emergency roof repairs would shatter instantly. She would see the truth in black and white ink. My life savings were stolen to build a tropical resort playground. 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was a text message from Patricia. It contained a single, devastating sentence. "I am so incredibly sorry." That message signaled the total collapse of my parents' social scaffolding. Patricia was the central node of our family's invisible telephone tree. Armed with the undeniable court documentation, she immediately went to work. She forwarded the PDF to the uncle in Jacksonville. She sent it to the cousins in Miami. She distributed the cold, hard evidence to every single flying monkey Susan had weaponized against me. The gossip mill reversed direction with dizzying, brutal speed. The extended family, realizing they had been used as pawns in a fraudulent smear campaign, turned their collective outrage toward the true culprits. Tyler's carefully curated image as a responsible, self-made family man was obliterated overnight. The curtain was pulled back, exposing him as an entitled grifter who relied on his mother's criminality to fund his vanity projects. The aunts and cousins retreated in deep, burning embarrassment. When Susan called back to follow up on her loan requests, her calls went straight to voicemail. When Tyler reached out, begging for mortgage assistance, his messages were left unread. Not a single relative offered them a dime. The financial tap was permanently welded shut. My parents found themselves entirely ostracized. They were suddenly experiencing the exact same isolation they had so gleefully orchestrated for me just a week prior. They could not show their faces at the country club. They could not post on social media without facing the silent judgment of their peers. The truth, backed by scant court documentation, served as a perfect, impenetrable defense for my reputation. The strategy had worked flawlessly. By stripping away their outside support system, Erica and I had trapped my abusers in a pressure cooker of their own design. The frozen accounts choked their resources, and the social exile destroyed their pride. They were cornered, panicked, and rapidly running out of options. People united purely by the convenience of exploiting a shared target rarely possess genuine loyalty to one another. When the consequences arrive and the escape routes disappear, alliances built on deceit inevitably crumble. Trapped in that Orlando house with a looming mechanics lien, a frozen bank account, and no family willing to offer a rescue, the tension between my brother, his wife, and my parents reached a boiling point. The wolves, starved of their usual prey, were about to turn their teeth on each other, and I was perfectly positioned to gather every piece of the fallout. Criminal syndicates and toxic families share a similar structural flaw. Their unity relies entirely upon the constant flow of unearned resources. When the cash flow evaporates, the loyalty disintegrates. Erica Stanton understood this psychological vulnerability perfectly. She did not merely want to sue my relatives, she intended to dissect them. Sitting in her corner office high above the Tampa skyline, I watched my attorney orchestrate the next phase of our offensive strategy. The emergency injunction had successfully starved them of capital. Now it was to extract the paper trail that would guarantee our victory in civil court. Our first target was the independent contractor in Orlando. Mike Reynolds possessed a temper as hot as a Florida summer afternoon. His business operated on strict margins, and Tyler, bouncing a primary construction draw, had ignited a fierce resentment. Erica drafted a formal subpoena duces tecum, commanding the production of all digital communications related to the outdoor renovation project. Mike did not fight the legal order. He welcomed it. He was eager to punish the client who had wasted his time and tied up his heavy machinery. A courier delivered a thick binder to our law firm 3 days later. It contained hundreds of printed text messages and email threads spanning 2 months. Erica spread the pages across her frosted glass conference table, smoothing the crisp white sheets with her manicured hands. We read through my brother's digital footprint. Tyler had adopted the persona of a wealthy real estate investor, negotiating material costs with unearned arrogance. The most damning piece of evidence sat on page 42 of the text logs. Mike had texted Tyler, inquiring about the timeline for the initial payment. Tyler responded with a cavalier disregard for financial truth. He typed, "Do not worry about the deposit clearing. I'm tapping into the old man's secret slush fund to pay for the upgrades in cash." I stared at those printed words. Secret slush fund. That single phrase was a legal goldmine. It obliterated the fabricated narrative my parents had peddled to the extended family. If the money was a legitimate gift meant to secure a safe environment for an infant, there would be no need for secrecy. Tyler knew the cash did not belong to him. He knew the source was illicit. He had documented his own premeditated knowledge of the theft, putting his guilt into the permanent record. Erica highlighted the text message with a bright yellow marker, a sharp smile touching the corners of her mouth. "This alone proves conversion," she murmured, sliding the paper into a specialized folder. "But we need to establish the exact depth of the premeditation. I want to know exactly how long your mother planned this extraction." To find that answer, my attorney directed her crosshairs at the banking institution. We had already secured the forged security waiver, but Erica wanted the digital metadata. She filed a discovery motion, demanding the corporate IT department produce the comprehensive IP login history for my legacy savings account. The financial institution, terrified of our impending negligence lawsuit, complied with unprecedented speed. They transmitted a secure spreadsheet containing every single digital access point recorded over the previous calendar year. Erica projected the data onto the large flat-screen monitor in her office. We traced the digital footprints. My own logins originated from my Tampa apartment and the corporate network at the hospitality group. But starting 8 months prior, a secondary IP address began pinging the server. Erica ran a trace on the numeric sequence. It mapped directly to the residential internet router located inside the Brandon subdivision. My parents' house. The spreadsheet revealed a chilling pattern. Susan had not just logged in once or twice out of idle curiosity. She had accessed my portal multiple times a week. She monitored the deposits from my double shifts. She watched the balance grow as I finalized my real estate plans. A profound wave of revulsion washed over me. My own mother had stalked my financial progress like a predator studying prey. She had calculated the exact moment the account reached its maximum value, waiting until the funds were perfectly ripe before executing the forgery. The theft was not an act of spontaneous desperation. It was a cold, calculated harvest. With the evidence piling up on Erica's desk, the pressure on my family reached a critical threshold. Defending against a civil fraud lawsuit requires highly specialized legal representation. Top-tier defense attorneys do not work on contingency. They demand substantial upfront retainers. Because my parents had tied up their liquidity in retirement portfolios to back Tyler's original mortgage, they lacked the liquid cash necessary to retain competent counsel. The financial squeeze ignited a spectacular civil war within their household. I learned the intimate details of their implosion not through hearsay, but directly from the source. My sister-in-law Ashley possessed a survival instinct that far outweighed her loyalty to her husband. Sensing the impending ruin of her comfortable lifestyle, she panicked. One afternoon, a lengthy email appeared in my corporate inbox. It bypassed my personal blocked caller list because Ashley had tracked down my professional contact information. The subject line read, "Please read this, I am so sorry." The message was a frantic, groveling plea for mercy, overflowing with grammatical errors and desperate concessions. In her attempt to separate herself from the sinking ship, she laid their domestic chaos bare. Ashley revealed that Robert and Susan were demanding Tyler liquidate his personal assets to fund the collective legal defense. Tyler owned a customized lifted pickup truck and a pair of expensive jet skis, items he had purchased using Robert's credit line years ago. The parents demanded he sell the toys to generate cash. Tyler had flatly refused. According to the email, a ferocious screaming match had erupted in the Brandon living room. Tyler threw a spectacular tantrum, refusing to part with his status symbols. He deflected the blame entirely onto my parents. He screamed that it was Susan's fault for getting caught. He criticized her sloppy forgery skills, claiming she should have executed the transfer with more discretion. He felt entitled to the stolen money and furious that their incompetence had cost him his backyard oasis. In retaliation, Susan turned her venom upon Ashley. The matriarch blamed her daughter-in-law for demanding the luxury upgrades in the first place. Susan accused Ashley of manipulating Tyler, claiming her endless desire to impress her shallow internet friends had forced the family into this horrific predicament. The household was tearing itself apart, each member desperately trying to shift the liability onto the person standing next to them. I read the frantic email while sipping a sparkling water in the break room of the resort. I felt no urge to reply. I did not forward the message to my parents to stir the pot. I simply printed a copy for Erica and deleted the digital file from my inbox. Ashley was hoping to cut a side deal, offering to testify against Susan if I agreed to unfreeze the Orlando accounts. She fundamentally misunderstood my objective. I was not interested in negotiating with accomplices. The people who had united under the banner of family loyalty were now exposing their true nature. The shared delusion of their superiority evaporated under the harsh, fluorescent lighting of legal discovery. They were trapped in a burning house of their own design, clawing at each other to find an exit that did not exist. I watched their alliance implode from a position of profound safety. The sterile, calm environment of my attorney's office served as a fortress against their chaotic warfare. For 32 years, I had absorbed their stress. I had internalized their conflicts and sacrificed my peace to maintain their equilibrium. Now, I sat untouched. The storm raged miles away, destroying the very foundation they had built upon my stolen labor. The paper trail was complete. We possessed the forged waiver, the contractor's explicit text messages, the bank's digital stalking logs, and the internal confessions of a fractured syndicate. Erica gathered the files, her dark eyes reflecting the thrill of the impending kill. It was time to pull them out of their living room and drag them under the unforgiving lights of a formal deposition. The time for hiding behind closed doors was officially over. November arrived with a sudden, unseasonable chill sweeping the residual humidity out of the Tampa air. The depositions occurred on a Tuesday morning, inside a windowless, soundproofed conference room at Erica Stanton's law firm. The environment was intentionally sterile. No warm mahogany, no scenic views of the bay, no comforting amenities, just stark white walls, a long slate table, and the quiet, rhythmic clicking of the court reporter's stenotype machine. That small device represented the ultimate equalizer. It transformed family secrets and whispered lies into permanent, undeniable public record. My relatives sat across the expanse of gray stone, and the arrogant bravado that had fueled their Sunday dinners had evaporated into the chilled air. Robert looked 10 years older. His posture stooped beneath a cheap gray suit he had clearly pulled from the back of his closet, lacking his usual country club confidence. Susan clutched a crumpled tissue in her lap, her pristine blonde hair looking slightly frayed at the edges. Tyler sat between them, bouncing his knee in a frantic, ceaseless rhythm, his eyes darting toward the exit. They had retained a discount defense attorney, a weary-looking man, carrying a scuffed briefcase, who spent the first 10 minutes checking his watch. They were about to discover a harsh reality of the American judicial system. Lying at a dining room table carried zero consequences, but lying under oath carried the very real threat of perjury. Erica called Susan to the hot seat first. My mother raised her right hand and took the oath, her voice barely a whisper. For the first 20 minutes, Erica lulled her into a false sense of security. She asked mundane background questions to establish a baseline of compliance, inquiring about residential history and employment status. She let the older woman breathe a fraction easier. Then, without any shift in tone, my attorney reached into her pristine leather portfolio and extracted a laminated copy of the yellow bank security document. She slid it across the slate. "Do you recognize this piece of paper, Mrs. Lee?" Susan stared at the document. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving a chalky pallor. She stammered, attempting to weave a convoluted tale about a misunderstanding at the teller window, claiming the bank clerk had verbally authorized the transaction. Erica did not let her finish the fable. She produced the IP login spreadsheet, demonstrating the months of digital stalking. She outlined the exact timeline, proving my mother had monitored my growing balance like a hawk, circling its prey. Then Erica leaned forward, her dark eyes locking onto her target. "You sat at your kitchen table and practiced your daughter's handwriting, did you not?" The defense attorney weakly objected, citing speculation, but Erica waved him off, pointing to the specific curvature of the ink on the certified page. "You mirrored the loops. You forged her name to bypass federal security protocols." Under the cold fluorescent lights, with the stenographer recording every syllable, Susan broke. She could not maintain the matriarchal fiction anymore. "Yes," she choked out a single tear, cutting through her heavy foundation. "I practiced it. I thought I was doing the right thing for my son." The confession hung in the room, a permanent stain on the legal record. Robert was called next. He attempted a different tactical approach. Where Susan tried to play the misguided martyr, my father tried to reassert his patriarchal dominance. He puffed out his chest and testified that the $85,000 was merely an informal family loan. According to his revised history, we operated under a loose verbal agreement, and I had simply changed my mind after the fact to be vindictive. He painted himself as a benevolent peacemaker caught in a petty sibling rivalry. Erica let him construct his flimsy defense for 5 uninterrupted minutes. When he finished, she produced the printed binder of Tyler's text messages. She read the contractor correspondence out loud, letting the syllables bounce off the bare walls. Tapping into the old man's secret slush fund. Next, Erica displayed Ashley's Instagram posts, highlighting the self-made hashtags and the boastful captions. "Mr. Lee," Erica asked, her voice dripping with surgical precision, "if this was a legitimate, agreed-upon loan, why did your son describe the capital as a secret slush fund to his vendors? And why did your daughter-in-law claim they saved every penny themselves?" Robert opened his mouth, but no sound emerged. His discount attorney rubbed his temples in visible defeat. The patriarchal illusion shattered, leaving behind a frail, exposed man who had enabled a felony out of sheer stubbornness. But the true devastation arrived when Tyler took the oath. My brother was drowning in his own perspiration, tugging at the collar of his dress shirt. The frozen accounts and the looming mechanics lien had stripped him of his usual smug armor. He was facing total financial ruin, and the pressure was visibly crushing his spine. Erica methodically boxed him in. She established his terrible credit history, his lack of savings, and his inability to secure traditional financing. She pressed him on the origin of the theft, asking who precisely initiated the plan to liquidate my legacy account. Tyler looked at Susan, then at Robert. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. The realization dawned on him that perjury carried a prison sentence, and his parents could not bail him out of a criminal indictment. The instinct for self-preservation overrode whatever shred of familial loyalty he possessed. He cracked. "It was not my idea," Tyler blurted out, his voice pitching an octave higher in panic. "I did not want the pool. Ashley did." The room went dead silent. Even the court reporter paused for a fraction of a second, her fingers hovering over the keys. Tyler leaned over the table, the words spilling out of him in a desperate, rapid-fire confession. He testified that his wife had been tracking her former high school rivals online. She was obsessed with matching the lavish lifestyles of her influencer friends. When Tyler admitted they could not afford the luxury backyard upgrades on their new property, Ashley delivered a brutal ultimatum. She threatened to file for divorce and take their infant daughter unless he provided the tropical oasis she demanded. According to the sworn testimony, Ashley was the one who remembered the legacy account. She was the one who suggested Susan utilize her cosigner status to drain the funds. My brother threw his entire family into the fire to save his own skin. He revealed that the great betrayal was not orchestrated for a noble rescue, but to appease a shallow, materialistic hostage situation. Susan buried her face in her hands and wept openly. It was a visceral, gut-wrenching sound that echoed off the bare walls. She realized her golden child, the son she had risked federal prison to protect, had just sold her out without a second thought. He exposed a premeditated conspiracy born from pure vanity. I sat across the table, watching the people who had tormented me collapse under the weight of their own deceit. I expected to feel a rush of triumphant joy, or perhaps a lingering sting of sorrow for the family I had lost. Instead, I felt a profound, magnificent emptiness. The emotional hold they possessed over me was severed. The toxic narrative they had forced me to carry for 3 decades was dead, replaced entirely by cold, unshakable, sworn testimony. The trap had fully snapped shut. The documentation was bulletproof. Desperate to avoid a public trial that would cement their ruin, their weary defense attorney requested an emergency recess, pleading for a mediation session. They were ready to negotiate, oblivious to the fact that I had no intention of offering mercy. Following Tyler's catastrophic perjury confession during the deposition, the discount defense attorney practically threw himself across the slate table to halt the proceedings. He recognized a sinking ship taking on water faster than he could bail. If those transcripts reached an open courtroom, my parents would face federal indictments, and their pristine suburban reputation would disintegrate into neighborhood scandal. He begged Erica for a formal mediation session, desperate to seal the records and settle the dispute behind closed doors. We agreed, but I dictated the geography. The session occurred 2 weeks later, in a private arbitration suite downtown. I sat beside my lawyer, sipping chilled mineral water, watching my abusers file into the room like prisoners marching toward a firing squad. The fortnight between the deposition and the mediation had not been kind to my older brother. Tyler looked physically hollowed out, a ghost haunting his own designer clothing. His expensive polo shirt hung loose around his stooped shoulders, and dark bruised circles shadowed his bloodshot eyes. The judicial asset freeze had executed its intended purpose with flawless mechanical cruelty. During that 2-week window, Mike Reynolds followed through on his ultimatum. When the frozen accounts failed to produce a valid cashier's check, the contractor marched down to the county clerk and slapped a mechanic's lien on the Orlando property. In Florida real estate, a mechanic's lien serves as a financial death sentence for a mortgaged home. It clouded the title instantly, triggering a catastrophic default clause in Tyler's lending agreement. The bank was threatening imminent foreclosure. Ashley, terrified of losing her curated influencer aesthetic, had reportedly packed her luxury bags, taken their daughter, and moved into a cheap motel. She left Tyler alone in a house featuring a sprawling crater of dirt in the backyard. His extravagant facade was reduced to useless rubble. A retired judge served as the neutral mediator, sitting at the head of the long oak table. The older man began the session with soft, practiced platitudes about healing fractured bonds, urging everyone to find common ground for the sake of shared blood. Erica let him speak for exactly 60 seconds before pointedly checking her wristwatch, signaling that our patience for sentimental fictions had expired. The defense attorney cleared his throat, opening a thin cardboard folder. He attempted to project confidence, but his hands betrayed a slight rhythmic tremor as he shuffled his papers. He presented their initial settlement offer, framing the document as a generous olive branch meant to restore domestic harmony. The terms were profoundly insulting, a testament to their enduring arrogance. They proposed repaying the stolen $85,000 in incremental, unverified monthly installments stretched over a grueling 10-year period. Furthermore, the draft contained a strict non-disparagement clause and required zero admission of guilt, categorizing the felony theft as a simple mutual misunderstanding regarding shared assets. They wanted me to finance their crime with a zero-interest, decade-long payment plan while legally gagging myself from ever speaking the truth. Erica Stanton did not offer a polite legal objection. She leaned back in her ergonomic leather chair and let out a sharp, piercing laugh. The sound cut through the tense atmosphere like a surgical blade. It was not a chuckle of amusement, but a bark of pure, unadulterated disdain. She picked up their proposed contract, pinched it between her index finger and thumb as if handling toxic waste, and tossed it back across the polished oak. The thin packet slid across the table, bumping harmlessly against Robert's clenched knuckles. My attorney then produced our actual terms, printed on heavy, premium stock paper, and outlined the inescapable reality of their situation. We demanded immediate, full restitution of the original funds transferred via certified wire by the close of business tomorrow. We added an additional $25,000 to cover my accumulated legal fees, ensuring I would not lose a single penny, securing my own justice. We required a sworn notarized document signed by both Susan and Tyler, explicitly acknowledging the deliberate forgery and the conversion of funds. Finally, we mandated a permanent, legally binding protective order, barring every member of that household from ever contacting my employers or attempting to access my financial institutions again. The defense lawyer sputtered, his face paling as he read the harsh stipulations. He protested that such severe demands would drain his client's retirement accounts and push Tyler into undeniable bankruptcy. Erica leaned forward, her dark eyes flashing with predatory delight. She informed him that our terms were entirely non-negotiable. She reminded the room that we held certified banking logs, a forged security waiver, and a sworn deposition detailing a premeditated conspiracy to commit wire fraud. If they refused to sign the documents before the sunset, she would lift the civil stay on our parallel criminal complaint. She promised to hand-deliver the entire evidence binder directly to the district attorney's fraud division the very next morning. She offered them a stark, uncompromising choice: sign the check or prepare for criminal arraignment. The brutal ultimatum shattered whatever fragile restraint Robert still possessed. My father, a man accustomed to dictating the terms of my existence with unquestioned authority, could not process his sudden, profound powerlessness. His face flushed a deep mottled purple, the veins bulging prominently against his stiff white collar. He slammed his fist against the table, the impact rattling the glass water pitchers and startling the retired judge. He pointed a trembling finger directly at my chest, abandoning all legal decorum in a desperate bid to reclaim control. He accused me of being a heartless mercenary. He screamed that I was destroying our family legacy over a petty grudge, prioritizing a real estate purchase over the survival of my own flesh and blood. His voice echoed off the acoustic paneling, demanding to know how I could sleep at night while my brother faced homelessness and his wife filed for divorce. He threw every ounce of his patriarchal fury at me, attempting to crush my resolve with the sheer volume of his disappointment. For 32 years, a display of Robert's unbridled rage would have forced my gaze to the floor. I would have folded inward, shrinking my posture, desperately apologizing to extinguish his wrath. I would have absorbed the blame to restore the household equilibrium. Sitting in that arbitration suite, insulated by cold facts and a brilliant attorney, I did not flinch. I did not blink. I held his furious stare, absorbing the heat of his anger and finding it entirely powerless. I let the silence stretch, allowing his heavy, ragged breathing to fill the room, highlighting the pathetic nature of his outburst. While Robert shouted, Susan sat frozen beside him, her previous aristocratic posture collapsing into a hollow shell. She gripped her designer handbag like a flotation device, silent tears cutting pathways through her carefully applied makeup. She did not attempt to defend me or calm her husband. She simply stared at the signed confession Erica had placed in front of her, realizing that her obsession with perfect calligraphy had ultimately authored her own destruction. Beside her, Tyler buried his face in his hands, emitting a low, pathetic sob. He had lost his wife, his pristine credit score, and his beloved status symbols, all because he believed he was entitled to the fruits of my labor. When I finally spoke, I did not raise my voice. I leaned forward, resting my forearms on the cool oak surface, and delivered the final blow in a quiet, measured tone that commanded the attention of every person present. You destroyed the family for a swimming pool. I stated the words, falling like heavy stones into a still pond. I am just giving you the bill. The mediator cleared his throat, attempting to restore order, but the power dynamic had permanently shifted. My statement hung in the air, an undeniable truth that stripped away their remaining defenses. They were not victims of a cruel legal system or a vindictive daughter. They were architects of their own ruin, facing the precise consequences of their greed. The illusion of the supportive, loving family was dead and buried beneath a mountain of certified court exhibits. There was no more debate, no more bargaining, and no more room for manipulation. They had reached the end of the line, and the only path forward required them to surrender everything they valued. The silence inside the arbitration suite following my final statement hung in the air, heavy and impenetrable. The mediator gathered his files, recognizing that the negotiation phase had concluded. There was no remaining middle ground. My parents and my brother were cornered, without a single viable exit. If they walked out of that room without signing the agreement, Erica Stanton would deliver the evidence binder to the district attorney by dawn. The threat of a criminal indictment, carrying the prospect of state prison for forgery and wire fraud, forced their hands. To meet the strict 24-hour deadline for full financial restitution, Robert and Susan faced a brutal logistical reality. They could not secure a standard bank loan in that time frame. Their only option was liquidating substantial fractions of their sheltered retirement portfolios. Sitting across the oak table, I watched my father pull his cell phone from his pocket. His fingers trembled as he dialed the number for his brokerage firm. He had to verbally authorize the emergency sale of mutual funds he had spent decades accumulating. Because he was withdrawing the capital prematurely, the transaction triggered severe federal tax penalties. A huge percentage of their nest egg evaporated instantly, just to access the required liquidity. Robert listened to the broker explain the penalties, his face turning a sickly shade of gray. The financial security they had carefully curated for their golden years was decimated in a matter of minutes. They had gambled their future to protect Tyler from the consequences of his own greed, and they lost everything. Tyler endured an even swifter downfall. The frozen accounts meant he missed his second consecutive mortgage payment. Coupled with the mechanics lien filed by the enraged contractor, the lending institution initiated default protocols. My brother could not refinance, nor could he borrow against the equity. He was forced to list his sprawling Orlando property for a short sale, surrendering the house back to the bank for less than the owed balance. His credit profile, which he had fraudulently tried to bypass by stealing my name, was now permanently ruined. The most poetic justice, however, remained rooted in the soil of his backyard. Mike Reynolds did not merely walk away from the unpaid job. Before filing the lien, the contractor dispatched his crew to reclaim every piece of unpaid material. They hauled away the imported travertine tiles, the custom grilling station, and the expensive filtration equipment. They left behind the raw excavation site. Tyler's desired tropical oasis became a literal hazard. The crew left a gaping rectangular crater in the earth, surrounded by mounds of displaced Florida sand and rusted rebar. When the seasonal afternoon thunderstorms rolled across the peninsula, the hole filled with stagnant, muddy rainwater, attracting swarms of mosquitoes. My brother had destroyed my dream of a quiet beachfront sanctuary, and his reward was a hazardous swamp he could not afford to fill. He dug his own grave in his backyard and had to stare at it every time he looked out the kitchen window. While my family scrambled to liquidate their assets, Erica pivoted her crosshairs toward our secondary target. The banking institution that processed the forged security waiver recognized their precarious legal exposure. Corporate attorneys abhor public negligence trials. They understand that a jury would severely punish a financial entity for handing a life savings to a fraudulent cosigner without checking a primary identification card. Erica did not even need to file a formal lawsuit against the bank. She arranged a conference call with their regional counsel, laying out the timeline, the IP login history, and a copy of the notarized confession Susan was forced to sign. The corporate lawyers surrendered within 48 hours. They offered a swift, confidential settlement to prevent the institutional failure from reaching the press. On a bright Thursday morning, my phone chimed with a notification from a newly established, heavily encrypted financial institution. I opened the application. The screen displayed my restored $85,000 down payment arriving via certified wire from Robert's liquidated retirement fund. A second wire transfer populated the ledger moments later, containing the additional settlement funds from the negligent bank, plus the $25,000 recovered for my legal fees. I stared at the glowing numbers on my screen. The money was finally secure, protected behind dual-factor authentication and biometric locks that no relative could ever bypass. The social consequences of their actions mirrored their financial ruin. Ashley, the sister-in-law who had orchestrated the theft to impress her internet followers, faced a harsh new reality. Her curated influencer aesthetic relied upon the illusion of endless disposable income. Without Tyler's house or my stolen cash to fund her vanity, the facade crumbled. Her Instagram account, once a daily broadcast of beige outfits and iced lattes, went dark. She deleted the application entirely. Through the inevitable grapevine of local gossip, I learned they had vacated the Orlando short sale and moved into a cramped two-bedroom rental apartment on the outskirts of the city. There were no luxury upgrades. There were no swim-up bars. The lavish lifestyle she believed she was entitled to vanished, replaced by the mundane struggle of living paycheck to paycheck on a ruined credit score. The final stipulation of our legal agreement required the permanent restoration of my character. I refused to let Susan's malicious smear campaign linger in the minds of the extended family. During the mediation, Erica forced both my mother and my brother to sign a detailed, notarized affidavit. The document served as an explicit confession. It stated they had conspired to commit forgery, unlawfully converted my funds for personal use, and knowingly distributed false information regarding my mental health to conceal their crimes. I did not mail the confession through the postal service. I digitized the document. I drafted a concise, factual email and attached the PDF. I inserted the email addresses of every aunt, uncle, and cousin who had left a cruel voicemail or sent a judgmental text message during those suffocating weeks. I clicked send and closed the laptop. I did not ask for their apologies. I did not care if they felt guilty for believing Susan's lies. The broadcast of the sworn confession served a single, definitive purpose. It eradicated the false narrative. The social scaffolding that had supported my parents' illusion of superiority fractured beyond repair. The relatives read the undeniable proof of the felony, realizing the depth of the deception. A profound, embarrassed silence settled over the extended family tree. Nobody reached out to defend Robert. Nobody offered Tyler a shoulder to cry on. The ostracization my mother had gleefully designed for me became her permanent, inescapable reality. My reputation was cleared, the funds were secured, and the legal boundaries severing me from their toxicity were ironclad. The long, grueling war of attrition had concluded. I poured myself a cup of dark roast coffee, breathing in the quiet, peaceful air of my apartment. The frantic energy that had sustained me for months slowly ebbed away, leaving behind a clear, unobstructed path forward. It was time to call my real estate agent and resume the search for my sanctuary. 6 months passed since the ink dried on the mediation agreement. The transition from active warfare to profound silence felt jarring at first, akin to stepping off a roaring freight train onto a deserted, sunlit platform. I spent the initial weeks waiting for a phantom ambush. My nervous system remained primed for conflict. I expected a blocked phone call, a disguised email originating from a burner account, or a sudden frantic knock on my apartment door. But the legal boundaries forged by Erica Stanton held firm, creating an impenetrable fortress around my daily routine. The permanent protective order was not a polite, written suggestion. It was a judicial mandate, backed by the swift threat of incarceration. My family understood the high stakes of violating that document. The silence stretched forward, unbroken and magnificent, allowing my exhausted mind to finally recalibrate. With the $85,000 down payment restored and the substantial corporate settlement resting safely inside my encrypted accounts, my financial reality underwent a fundamental shift. I no longer needed to settle for the modest inland real estate I had originally bid on. The universe, guided by cold, legal leverage and unyielding documentation, expanded my purchasing power. I called my real estate agent and discarded the old parameters. We widened the search radius, driving west across the Howard Franklin Bridge, leaving the dense, frantic energy of Tampa behind. We headed toward the diverse coastline of St. Petersburg, a city where the warm breeze carried the distinct, sharp scent of salt sea oats and blooming jasmine. We toured several properties, but the moment I stepped inside the fifth listing, my chest expanded. It was a stunning, upgraded waterfront residence located on a quiet, exclusive stretch of the Gulf of Mexico. The unit sat high above the shoreline on the 10th floor, featuring sprawling floor-to-ceiling windows that framed an unobstructed panorama of the turquoise water. The interior boasted pale, wide-plank oak floors, a chef's kitchen featuring polished quartz countertops, and a sweeping wraparound balcony designed to catch the evening trade winds. It was not a starter home. It was a fortress of serenity built upon a foundation of my own hard-won resilience. I signed the closing documents with a smooth, steady hand, using a black ink pen. My signature belonged solely to me, an authentic mark securing a future no one could forge or steal. Moving day occurred on a bright, cloudless Tuesday. I unpacked my cardboard boxes, slowly arranging my life exactly how I wanted it, devoid of any outside influence. There were no compromises required. There was no catering to the endless demands of a chaotic household. I placed a plush velvet armchair right beside the sliding glass doors, creating a dedicated reading nook bathed in warm, natural sunlight. I stocked the stainless steel refrigerator with my favorite foods, free from the subtle judgments or passive comments that used to echo through my mother's kitchen during family dinners. Every piece of furniture, every framed photograph resting on the mantel, every quiet corner of the expansive space served as a physical testament to survival. The true weight of my victory did not fully materialize until the first major holiday weekend arrived. Traditionally, holidays functioned as a grueling marathon of catering shifts, followed by mandatory, exhausting appearances at the Brandon subdivision. I used to show up physically drained, carrying expensive bottles of wine, only to spend the entire evening navigating Robert's subtle criticisms and Tyler's endless, hollow boasting. I would leave those gatherings feeling depleted, serving as the designated emotional sponge for their collective dysfunction. This year, the holiday weekend arrived and my cell phone remained blissfully dark. There were no frantic text messages demanding I pick up a last-minute honey-baked ham. There were no manufactured guilt trips regarding my arrival time. I woke up naturally, the morning sun warming my sheets. I brewed a pot of expensive espresso and walked out onto my balcony. I rested my forearms on the glass railing and watched a pair of dolphins breach the surface of the water, their sleek gray bodies catching the early light. The absence of my family was not an aching void. It was a vast, open expanse filled with the soothing, rhythmic sound of crashing waves. I realized with startling clarity that I did not miss them. I missed the fictional version of them I had spent 3 decades trying to earn. I mourned the supportive parents I deserved, but I felt zero lingering grief for the greedy people I left behind. Growing up in the South, the culture around me insisted that being a good daughter meant possessing an infinite, unbreakable capacity for sacrifice. Society taught you to mend the bridges others intentionally burned. You were expected to offer your time, your credit score, and your sanity to patch the leaking holes in the family boat. If a brother stumbled due to his own arrogance, you caught him. If a father commanded obedience, you surrendered your autonomy. If a mother wept, you relinquished your boundaries. Unconditional, blind loyalty was dressed up as a noble virtue, praised by aunts and uncles during Sunday sermons and backyard barbecues. I learned the hard way that blind loyalty is just a disguised form of self-destruction. It operates as a slow, quiet poisoning of your own potential. My parents had convinced me that my independence was a selfish endeavor, hoping I would remain tethered to their sinking ship. They required my financial stability to subsidize their constant chaos. But the ordeal with the forged bankway, of the luxury contractor's invoice, and the sworn deposition shattered that deep conditioning forever. I saw the raw, ugly mechanics of their affection. It was purely transactional. The exact moment I stopped providing the capital for their comfort, their love vanished, replaced by a ruthless, coordinated campaign to destroy my character. I walked back into my custom kitchen, the cool oak floor soothing against my bare feet. I opened the wine fridge and retrieved a bottle of crisp, chilled Sauvignon Blanc. I poured a glass, watching the pale liquid catch the amber light of the fading afternoon. I carried the crystal stemware back out to the wraparound balcony. The Florida sun was beginning its slow, majestic descent, dipping toward the horizon and setting the Gulf on fire with brilliant hues of crushed orange, deep magenta, and bruised indigo. The coastal breeze ruffled my hair, carrying the distant, joyful sound of a passing sailboat. I leaned against the glass railing, looking out over the endless expanse of water. I thought about Tyler trapped in his cramped, noisy rental apartment, staring at the bleak consequences of his vanity. I thought about Susan and Robert, isolated in their suburban home, their retirement portfolios decimated by tax penalties, their social standing ruined by their own notarized signatures. They had gambled my future to build an artificial backyard oasis, and they lost the gamble in spectacular fashion. I took a slow sip of the wine. It tasted clean, bright, and sharp. A profound, unshakable peace settled over my shoulders, releasing the tension I had carried since childhood. I did not feel an ounce of guilt for the wreckage they now inhabited. The waterfront sanctuary surrounding me was entirely mine, bought and paid for with grit, strategic planning, and an iron will. For 32 years, I believed my ultimate purpose was to save my family from themselves. I finally stopped saving them, and in doing so, I saved myself. The greatest tragedies enacted within the walls of the modern American home rarely involve masked intruders, sudden calamities, or cinematic disasters. Instead, they manifest as slow, quiet erosions of trust, orchestrated by the very individuals tasked with building our foundational security. When we examine the harrowing narrative of the stolen down payment, the $85,000 is merely the surface debris of a much deeper, more catastrophic collapse. The true devastation lies in the psychological wreckage left behind. It stands as a profound cautionary tale about the fragile architecture of parenting, the true definition of family responsibility, and the generational consequences of emotional blindness. In our culture, we frequently elevate the traditional family structure onto an untouchable pedestal, viewing it as the ultimate sanctuary against a harsh world. Yet this story forces us to ask a terrifying question. What happens when the sanctuary operates like a syndicate? To raise a child in today's society is to navigate an endless, complex minefield of moral and ethical choices. True parenting demands an unwavering daily commitment to honesty, fairness, and a profound emotional awareness. The parents in this narrative, Susan and Robert, failed not because they lacked financial resources or societal status, but because they lacked fundamental emotional courage. They tumbled into the insidious, toxic trap of the golden child dynamic. By constantly shielding their son Tyler from the natural consequences of his own ineptitude, vanity, and laziness, they did not protect him. They emotionally stunted him. They critically confused enabling with loving. In their desperate, misguided bid to maintain the outward illusion of his success, a sprawling house, a luxury saltwater pool, a perfectly curated social media existence, they willingly sacrificed the character, stability, and future of one child to feed the bottomless ego of another. Fairness in parenting does not necessarily dictate identical uniform treatment, but it absolutely requires equal respect for each child's autonomy, dignity, and hard work. When Susan meticulously practiced her daughter's handwriting and forged that bank security waiver, she did not merely commit a federal felony. She committed the ultimate parental betrayal. She looked at her daughter's grueling labor, the exhausted double shifts, the bleeding heels, and the years of disciplined quiet saving, and deemed it entirely worthless compared to her son's superficial immediate desires. This is the tragic, inevitable outcome of a household dynamic completely devoid of emotional awareness. Parents who lack the psychological capacity to see their children as separate, autonomous human beings inevitably reduce them to mere tools. In the Lee household, Kristen was the utility. Tyler was the prize. This toxic dichotomy destroys the very essence of family responsibility, twisting it from a mutual support system into a parasitic hierarchy where the strongest are bled dry to sustain the weakest. Providing long-term guidance for children requires the immense bravery to let them fail. In American culture, we heavily idolize the self-made narrative of rugged independence. Yet, suburban parenting often breeds a culture of hyper-dependence. We pressure parents to act as eternal safety nets, ensuring their offspring never experience the harsh educational sting of rock bottom. If Robert and Susan had practiced genuine family responsibility, they would have let Tyler's checks bounce a decade ago. They would have allowed his vehicles to be repossessed and his credit score to accurately reflect his irresponsibility. By refusing to let him face the natural friction of the real world, they actively stripped him of the opportunity to develop resilience, integrity, and genuine self-reliance. They built a fragile glass house for him and then criminally stole his sister's stones to build a protective wall around it. The agonizing irony is that in trying to save him from minor, necessary struggles, they orchestrated his total, devastating, and highly public ruin. We see these exact dynamics play out in countless homes across the country, masked by polite smiles, manicured lawns, and tense holiday dinners. We carry the heavy ghosts of our own family's unspoken expectations, often wondering if we are the only ones silently screaming against the crushing unfairness of it all. We recognize the subtle guilt trips, the weaponized loyalty, and the quiet expectation that we must diminish our own light so someone else can shine. This shared, unspoken pain is exactly why we must share these narratives. We tell these stories because the truth, no matter how uncomfortable or disruptive, remains the only effective antidote to the poison of family secrets. If you have ever felt like the invisible, unappreciated pillar holding up a crumbling household, or if you recognize the dark shadows of these dynamics creeping into your own life, you are not alone. Join our community of survivors, cycle breakers, and truth tellers. Subscribe and follow Intimately Told Stories as we continue to shine a relentless light on the hidden realities of the human experience, peeling back the polite veneers to reveal the raw, beating heart beneath. The conventional wisdom deeply embedded in our society insists that family is an unbreakable sacred bond. We are taught from childhood that blood is thicker than water, that sacrifice is the ultimate currency of love, and that endless forgiveness is a mandatory toll we must pay to maintain a seat at the dinner table. We are instructed to turn the other cheek to keep the peace, and to absorb the blow for the greater good of the household. But this narrative demands that we confront a terrifying, unconventional truth. Sometimes the most profound act of love you can offer your family is to stop saving them. We dangerously mistake forced sacrifice for morality. We believe that if we just give a little more, bend a little further, or absorb one more betrayal, we can somehow heal the brokenness of the people who raised us. But feeding a parasite does not cure it. It only makes the parasite stronger while you slowly, quietly wither away. True family responsibility is not blind, unconditional loyalty to toxic behavior. True responsibility is accountability. Kristen did not destroy her family. Her family was already a hollow, rotting structure, propped up entirely by her stolen labor and enforced silence. By utilizing the law, executing rigid boundaries, and walking away, she simply removed the final load-bearing pillar and let gravity do its inevitable, necessary work. As you look at the landscape of your own life and at the endless demands placed upon you by the people who claim to love you, you must ask yourself a deeply uncomfortable question. Are you building a sanctuary, or are you just funding a syndicate? The line between righteous loyalty and tragic self-destruction is incredibly thin. We are conditioned to believe that walking away from blood is the ultimate failure. But history and experience prove otherwise. Sometimes the only way to win the twisted family game is to refuse to play it at all. When you finally stop setting yourself on fire to keep your abusers warm, the ensuing cold might just be the most liberating chill you will ever feel.